Hi, we're back. Rest of the weekend streams for me. As in my vacation. Sucks. But here we are. We are reading Word Scaleborn by Courtney Alameda. I, I thought it was a pretty good book. There's a scene I would love to see animated, and if I can figure out how to do it, I am freaking good at animate it, and you'll know when it is. It's still a bit farther on in the book, but you'll see it. You'll know it when you see it. It's a freaking awesome scene. So how's everybody doing tonight? All right. Let's see here. We'll leave it. Yeah, it's gonna do that kind of shit to me. Okay. So does that make the other screen the main screen so I can see and somebody chats? Come on. No screen. There you go. They have a rewards enabled on my channel and it's like, uh, yeah, nobody's getting any subscriptions because I'm not in their algorithm base. I'm not big enough for them, so I mean, it's not gonna happen. Now or when, I don't know. But I'm gonna take my headphones off because every time I have music playing in the background and it's supposed to be free music that I'm paying a subscription for, YouTube doesn't like it. All right. Let's hope I don't have too many coughing fits while I talk. I don't think I'm going to, but I don't know. All right. Let's begin. Brack soared high over the northern plains, the cold air rushing across his molten scales. The frigid temperatures failed to dull the anger coursing through his veins. Only the thrill of combat could do that. He craved the clash of fang and claw, the bright bite of pain, the hot rush of violence. Today, Farak would draw blood from Eridicron's stone hide. The word on the winds said that Eridicron had guided Razagath through the rituals necessary to become imbued with the primal elements. The fact that she had survived the process spoke to the strength of her connection to storm magic, for hundreds of others had perished in the attempt before Farak's own success. It wasn't that Farak minded adding a third incarnate to their ranks, oh no. They would need more incarnates if they meant to face the aspects on the battlefield. Farak was furious because the Ridicron hadn't even consulted him on the matter. How bold of him, Farak thought. As if I were a mere pawn, and he the unquestioned leader. He swooped lower as he drew closer to Eridicron's den of Harrow Steep. In the south, Galacron's monstrous rib bones arched into the sky. Though the beast had been dead for more than 10 years, scraps of flesh still clung to the bones, flailing in the breeze. The stench from his flesh only stoked the fire of Farak's anger. Galacron reminded Farak of Alexstrasza's victory and rise as dragon aspect. Too many dragons had chosen to follow his cousin into folly. Even Tyrannostraz, the ancient and righteous worm, had chosen Alexstrasza over his own primal nature. Directly to the south, a new Titan abomination took shape, rising in the shadow of Galacron's fall. Farak's scouts said that the aspects were to name this tower Wormrest Temple. Now you know where it comes from. To Farak's eye, the tower was even more monstrous than the stinking pile of Galacron's bones. No doubt the aspects would use the place to spy on the primal dragons. Farak wanted to scorch it to the ground, but Eridicron had forbidden him from attacking the Ordered outright. Do not alarm the aspects, Urikron had said. The less they suspect, the better. Farak had scoffed at the idea. Rather than wait and watch, the Incarnates needed to strike at Valdraken now, before the aspect's dragon flights grew any larger or more powerful. The fifth and final Oathstone had been empowered in Nostormu's bastion of Thaldraxxus last spring, and Farak had heard of the changes in the Oathstones wrought in the flights. By all reports, the Order were stronger now and more unified. Rumors of their strength drew more dragons to the Broodlands. Just checking my levels here. Yeah, it looks alright. Okay. No matter. Hundreds of primal dragons have already joined Farak's cause, and had thousands of Tarasek, the small bipedal dragonkind natives to the Dragon Wilds. If he and Ikridikron flew on Valdraken, Farak was certain they could crush Alexstrasza and her allies with their combined might. And yet Ikridikron had insisted they wait. Farak hated that so many of his allies had turned to Ikridikron for leadership. If anyone had the right to lead their new movement, it was he. Farak had been the first to speak out against Alexstrasza and the Aspects, the first to survive being suffused by elemental energies, and the one who had rallied a rapidly growing force of primal dragons to the cause. He deserved to lead the growing rebellion, not Ikridikron. Which was exactly why Farak had flown north from his lair in the Caldera. If Ikridikron wanted to lead, he would have to take that right by wing and by talon. Farak would not simply bow to Ikridikron's whims, even if Ikridikron had been the one to discover how to imbue oneself with elemental energies in the first place. One massive craggy peak seared in the sky, standing taller than any other mountain in the whole range, Harrow's Deep. At its base, Farak spotted the mouth of a familiar cavern, one encrusted with glittering ice and snow. Ikridikron had dug tunnels far into the world's crust, allowing him to absorb the element of stone unhindered. It was said the earth itself now responded to the stone-scaled mastery. A formidable foe, to be sure, but Farak feared no dragon. Farak landed in the snow, which melted and hissed beneath his feet. Two primal dragons, each with mottled gray scales, stood guard at the cavern's entrance. "I am here to see Ikridikron," he said to the guards. His breath plumed around his snout. "Take me to him." The two dragons shared a look. "No, Blazing One," the first replied in his underdeveloped speech, cocking his head. Stone-scaled busy." "Ikridikron will make time for me," Farak said. The dragon narrowed his eyes. "No, he busy." Farak stepped forward, scales blazing. A column of fire swirled around him, melting the snow in a 2-wingspan diameter and desiccating the earth below his feet. The two primal dragons stumbled back, dropping their heads to protect their throats. They ruffled the protective scales around their shoulders and backed away, smelling of sharp, coppery fear. Farak scoffed. He could snuff out the sparks of their lives with a single swipe of his talons. "Do you think I cower before your master?" Farak said, stepping toward the cavern. "It is because of me that he discovered how to attain his power. Without me, he would not be the snow-scaled. Step aside, or I will return you to the ground for which you so desperately cleave." The interior of Harrow's Deep had changed since Farak had last seen it. The main cavern yawned wider and higher than before, and the air smelled of sulfur and smoke. Hundreds of stalactites hung from the ceiling, toothy and sharp. A circular sinkhole dominated the floor, twisting down into tunnels and warrens. Farak thought the sinkhole might be 10 wingspans wide, maybe more. A new waterfall tumbled through it, plunging hundreds of talon lengths into a dark pool at the bottom. Stepping inside Harrow's Deep felt like walking into the maw of a giant predator. It left Farak feeling ill at ease. He shook off the feeling with a growl. The guards are right, Farak thought, stalking toward the edge of the sinkhole. Stone-scaled busy. Everywhere he looked, Harrow's Deep bustled with activity. Primal dragons excavated new tunnels. Tarasek scurried out, carrying supplies to and fro. Shouts echoed. Metal rang on metal. Farak narrowed his eyes. What was Eridicron planning without him this time? You there, Farak said, gesturing to a small pack of Terrasec with a talon. One of them squeaked and dropped the hide-wrapped package it was carrying. Tell me where Eridicron is, now! Terrasec pointed shaking talons to a large-mouthed tunnel at the base of the sinkhole. With a growl, Farak dived off the ledge and plummeted towards the blue water at the bottom. The waterfall spray evaporated against the heat of his scales. Farak alighted on a ledge below the waterfall. The sulfur smell grew stronger here, acrid enough to make his eyes water. He followed the tunnel into the earth. Phosphoric green mushrooms grew along the ceiling, providing little light. The deeper Farak went, the more the tunnels tightened. He bristled every time his wings scraped the walls. The ground trembled underfoot, shaken by unseen forces. Bits of rock and dust hit his scales, giving him the uncomfortable reminder of just how deep he was beneath the surface. Farak wasn't meant to be underground like this, trapped like some lesser beast, the bright fires in his belly smothered. Perhaps he had been brash to think he could challenge Eridicron in his seat of power, but he wasn't about to turn back. Not now. When Farak emerged into a wide cavern, some of the tensions in his chest unspooled. Unlike the upper cavern, the place had no natural light. Instead, great fires burned in clawed braziers, casting shadows across the walls. The air felt humid and damp. Droplets of water dripped off the ends of stalactites. Massive pillars bore the weight of the mountain, their forms twisted and bulbous. If the upper cavern was the maw of the beast, Farak was now in the creature's belly. Eridicron's voice rumbled through the room, his voice indecipherable. Farak turned his head, following the stone-scaled's voice. To monitor the aspect's progress, Eridicron said as Farak drew closer. Neltharion builds a fortress along the western borders of the Broodlands. We must infiltrate the new construction and design an ingress point, preferably underground. Eridicron stood in a small chamber surrounded by 7 or 8 of his wing leaders. Since being imbued with primal earth energies, Eridicron's scales had hardened to stone. The incarnate had doubled in size and towered over the other dragons in the room, a mountain among the foothills. Amber earth energy seeped out the fissure on his back, reminding Farak of the volcanoes that should crack the earth wide open. Eridicron's every movement made the ground shudder. As Farak stepped into the cavern, the stone scale turned his bright, piercing gaze on him. The other primal dragons swiveled their heads, looking askance at Farak. Eridicron stood before a strange stone slab, one with features Farak thought he recognized, just a miniature. Farak frowned. Were not those the mountains of Thaldraxxus? And the depression there, did that not symbolize the Emerald Plains? Though Farak hadn't spent much time in the Broodlands, he still recalled its prominent features. It was clear that Eridicron was plotting something, without Farak. Again. I do not recall inviting you to this meeting, Eridicron said, annoyed. He tapped the map of the Broodlands with a talon. It sank into the stone floor with a rumble. I need no invitation, Farak spat, stepping into the room. I will have an audience, Eridicron. You have no right to barge into my keep and demand an audience, Eridicron replied. I have business to conduct. We can speak later. No! We will speak now, Farak said. I was the first incarnate across the breach, the first to succeed. I will not bow to you, Eridicron. One of Eridicron's wing leaders turned on Farak with a growl. A second joined the first, fangs flashing. Without a word, the stone scale drew himself up to his full height. He thumped his tail on the ground, sending shivers through the stone floor. The 2 wing leaders looked to Eridicron and bowed their heads, cowed. Well, Farak would not be cowed. He was a dragon born of fire and fury, not some spineless lackey. You hide here in your lair, using the power I helped you attain to build a fortress, rally an army, and craft your little schemes, which you keep from everyone, even those to whom you owe allegiance, Farak said with a snarl. A sharp pebble pricked the bottom of his foot, then another. Farak shook out one foot and continued, That was not your knowledge alone to share, especially with one as unpredictable as Razagath. The stone-scaled said nothing. He watched Farak with an unsettling intensity, unmoving, unblinking. His refusal to speak only buffeted the flames of Farak's fury. This is just like you, Farak continued, fire now spouting from his tongue. All you do is watch. Wait! We should have engaged the aspects before they started turning our kind into more of those titan abominations. You counsel patience while you hide in your den, allowing the aspects to grow stronger by the day. You are a fool, Eridicron. At the word fool, the stone-scaled glowing eyes narrowed. His wing leaders went still. One of them looked upon Farak with pity, but he ignored it, just like he ignored the trembling ground beneath his feet. One thing you must learn about me, Farak, Eridicron said softly, tilting his head a few degrees to the left, is that I prefer my enemies unseeing, unaware of my full strength, until it is much too late. A great weight settled between Farak's shoulder blades. He shifted, shuffling his wings, joints creaking. He tried to lift his feet, but to his horror, he could not feel or move them. Farak looked down. The floor softened beneath him as if turned to mud. His feet sank into the rock, which grew solid once more. As the gray stone began to swallow up his shins, his heart skipped a beat. Panicked, he tried to tug himself free. When he attempted to flap his wings to generate lift, the floor held him fast. The fury coursing through Farak's veins cooled to fear. What? He gasped, struggling in his stony shackles. Eridicron! You would lift talon against me? Me? Your brother and the very spark of your success? Saying nothing, Eridicron stalked forward, eyes slitted. His wing leaders scattered before him. The great energies along the stone-scaled spine blazed even brighter. Do you truly think I hide here in Harrow's Deep, ignorant of the threat growing in the east? He asked quietly. Let me go! Farak managed, nearly choking on the words. A gorge grew at his throat, making him feel as though he had swallowed a stone. Was that also the stone-scaled's power, or merely his own debilitating fear? He tossed his head, trying to break free of Eridicron's trap. Still the fire dragon sank lower, till stone constricted his ribs and his breath. Farak was going to die here, far from the sky, starving for air. He gasped, eyes bulging, heart shuddering, yet he could not draw enough air to satisfy his need. His flames withered and the heat in his body dwindled. Fire has the power to cleanse the world, but only molten stone has the power to shape it, Eridicron said. We cannot face the aspects as we are, and your wanton belligerence will prove no match for one such as Neltharion. Our new movement needs someone to temper it, mold it, hone it. Do you understand? Darkness edged Farak's sight. He was drowning, dying. Yes, he rasped. Good, Eridicron said, tapping a single talon on the floor. The stone released Farak, who collapsed to the ground and sucked in a deep, greedy breath. When the air hit his lungs, it sent him into a coughing fit, belching smoke and ash. Hot tears leaked from his eyes, and he clawed at the earth as his muscles spasmed. Do not mistake me, Farak, Eridicron said. Your fiery rhetoric will convince many of the nobility of our cause, as it did me. But you do not have the temperament to lead. Farak lifted his head to meet Eridicron's gaze. From wingtip to wingtip, every part of him ached. He swallowed hard, wincing at the rough gasp of air in his throat and lungs. Follow me, Eridicron said. Together you and I shall put an end to the aspects and their titan defilement. I swear to you this day I will not allow them to drive our kind to the brink of extinction. Farak wasn't sure why he said yes. Perhaps he was surprised Iridikron let him live. Or perhaps the last 20 or 30 heartbeats had given him a newfound respect for the stone-scaled. Or perhaps all Farak had wanted was an assurance that the incarnates would not disregard the aspect's tyranny, that Iridikron meant to do something with the power Farak had helped him attain. Now he knew. "Come," Iridikron said, moving toward the cavern door. "Let us see how our sister fared." As Farak and Iridikron flew, the skies over the northern storm-scale mountains rolled with a thick purple-black clouds, turning the day to darkest night. An enormous cyclone churned across the landscape. Bright blue bolts of lightning danced through the storm, illuminating the clouds from within. Farak could taste the energy from the bolts on his tongue. Its current crackled along its scales. The winds howled, trying to pull him into their restless maelstrom. In all his years, Farak had never seen such a terrible squall. It left a wide trail of destruction in its wake, tearing a deep gash in the valley floor, uprooting trees, and sending animals fleeing. And yet there was something thrilling about witnessing such a wanton display of power. Razageth's strength and ability was undeniable. Perhaps Iridikron was right to choose her to be the third incarnate. Razageth's laugh boomed through the heavens, intoxicated with elemental power. "These winds will snap the wings from our backs," Iridikron called to Farak. "Come, let us take shelter in the stone." Iridikron tucked his wings close to his body and dived toward the nearby mountain peak. Despite what had happened just hours before, Farak would be glad to have the mountain's unshakable stone beneath his feet. He folded his wings and followed, landing atop a nearby mountain beside Iridikron. "Look at her," Iridikron said, his voice brimming with pride. "Is Razageth not magnificent? Is she not the very pinnacle of what our kind can achieve? How could our brethren turn to the Keepers when everything we need is already within our grasp?" "I do not know," Farak replied, turning his face skyward. "But the schism that divides our kind must be ended. All dragons should be free, not just from the Titan's edicts, but from Alexstrasza's false reign." Iridikron was silent for a moment, watching the storm rage before them. He turned to Farak. "And fight we shall. All I ask is for your trust. No, your patience, which I know is in short supply." Farak blew a hot breath from his nostrils. Iridikron snorted, lifting his gaze back to the storm. "We will put an end to the aspects and their masters, but we must approach the coming battle with strategy and care. And I am reluctant to strike as long as Tyr still lives. We cannot know the full extent of the magic the Keepers have granted the aspects, but there are no longer the dragons we once knew." "Luckily, neither are we," Farak said. Before Iridikron could reply, a massive bolt of lightning shot from the heavens, shaking the earth and gashing open the clouds. A column of sunlight dropped into the storm. The light fell upon a dragon Farak no longer recognized. White-blue lightning now danced down Razageth's back, leapt across her wings, and sparked from her eyes. Her once mottled dull scales now gleamed purple-black, the same color as the clouds that swirled around her. Razageth was the embodiment of storm, imbued with all the wrath and brutality of the sky's fiercest tempests. "If we mean to face the aspects," Iridikron told Farak, "we'll need at least one more." "Who?" Farak asked, cocking his head. "Few dragons have the strength, will, instinct, and determination to survive the process of being imbued with the elements." "I can think of one other. One whose presence among us would pierce Alexstrasza's heart like a talon," Iridikron replied. "But that concern is for another day. Come, Farak, let us congratulate our sister on her ascension." Part 2, Growing Storm. From the Oral Histories of Nosdormu, the Timeless One. When one has lived through the ages, the seasons turn faster, ever faster. Months pass like moments, moving so swiftly that only the bronzes take note. Our kind is long marked time only by the rise and fall of the sun, by the seasonal migration of the herds, by the crack of eggshells and the first breaths of new life. The concept of keeping time is new to our kind. Annals and histories are even more foreign and strange, but I find myself compelled to recount these stories nonetheless. In the year we began construction on Wormrest Temple, Razaget the Storm Eater joined Iridikron of Farak as an incarnate. The news sent the first ripple of fear through the Broodlands. The incarnate influence was spreading, and true to her nature, Razaget was far more tempestuous than the other members of her cohort. Perhaps Farak found joy in battle, but Razagat derived it from killing. We believe her bolts struck our kind from the skies, though we could not prove it with absolute certainty, and could not demand justice for those killed. Our flights continued to thrive despite growing opposition. We finished construction on Valdraken, then on the Red Dragonflight's Ruby Life Pools. 20-odd years later, the Black Dragonflight completed the Obsidian Citadel, followed closely by the first of the two great towers in the Azure Span, Vakthros, the heart of the Blue Dragonflight's power. For nearly 2 centuries, we did everything possible to build bridges with our primal kin. Due to its proximity to Harrow's Deep, Wormrest Temple became a center for our diplomatic endeavors. We encouraged primal dragons to join us there, which resulted in a few scattered successes. Those efforts halted, however, when the Winterscorn Vrykul captured hundreds of primal dragons and forced them to fight in the Titan Forge's bloody civil war. The fighting grew so intense that Tyr called upon we 5 aspects to help him end it, and we gladly flew to his aid. We not only helped him defeat the Winterscorn, but Ysera and I also wove a spell that put the Vrykul into a deep, dreamless sleep. Though we helped free our kin, the war gave primal dragons another reason not to trust the Keepers, the Titan Forged, and the aspects ourselves. The primal dragons were furious that we did not destroy the Winterscorn outright for their crimes against our kind, pointing to our mercy as further evidence of our obeisance to the Keepers. Now the path to the lasting peace seems muddled and fraught. As aspects, we will continue to work toward a brighter future for all dragonkind, although we would be remiss not to acknowledge the deadly storms brewing on the horizon. Now, so side note, when you're doing Wrath of the Lich King, you'll notice that there's certain areas where the Vrykul are taking the more primal dragons and trying to make them into their pets, war beasts, things like that. They're still doing that. Now, the Vrykul are also Titan-made. So they're supposed to be helping with Ulduar, I believe. And for them to have these civil wars, I believe it has something to do with the eventual curse of flesh that's happening to the Vrykul. I believe that was happening at that time. Which will become what we know as humans later on. But yeah, the Vrykul did get tainted and possessed, and they had to be put into a stasis, basically, by Ysera. It was about the time of Wrath of the Lich King they were starting to wake up again, and that's where the humans found out where they actually come from. Or at least they remember again where they come from. Because they probably kept no records of that. Alright, I'll continue on. As the years passed, the Order Dragons expanded their dominion, yet Veranoth remained unconvinced of the Aspect's cause. Still, she made a point to visit Alexstrasza and the Broodlands when she could, if only to stay apprised of the Aspect's activities. Today, Veranoth's heart soared as she swooped over the waking shores, on her way to meet Alexstrasza's newest clutch of whelps. There were few pleasures so gentle as meeting newborn whelplings, natural born or ordered. The sun shone bright, warming her scales and filling her with a youthful, long-forgotten exuberance. She tucked her wings and dived through a redstone arch, enjoying the feeling of the temporary weightlessness, then stretching them wide to catch the breeze. Dipping lower, she trailed her back talons in a river, startling a flock of ducks into flight. The whole world smelled alive. Flowers burst with the spring season, and fresh grass danced in the breeze. The birdlands flourished under Alexstrasza's reign, and yet Veranoth found herself no more willing to join the flights than before. Out of respect for Alexstrasza, Veranoth had given order magic due consideration. The Dragonflight's fledgling civilization seemed inherently good, even honorable. She had watched their development with great interest, wondering if they would stay true to the lofty ideas upon which they had been founded. Indeed, they fulfilled the commands of their masters with single-minded zeal, and that was precisely the problem. Veranoth valued her agency, her free will, her ability to go where and when she desired. The Order enjoyed no such freedoms, having pledged themselves to the building up of the Dragonflights and the defense of the world at large. And as much as she loved her friend, she needed no queen to do her thinking for her. Iridocron was little better than the aspects themselves, altering himself for the sake of power. More than a century ago, he'd taken to calling himself an incarnate, positioning himself to be Dragonkind's best hope for to remain free from the aspectral threat. He courted Veranoth's favor incessantly, almost obsessively at times, sending his emissaries and promising her a place at his side. Only one time he had come to her himself, in the years after the aspects completed their work on Wormrest Temple. "I will ask you to join me but once," he had said to her. "Deny me, and I shall not trouble you again." Veranoth said nothing to him then, still unsure of her own heart. The struggle between aspect and incarnate left her in an unenviable position. She never wanted to be ordered, no wish to be imbued with the planet's elemental energies, especially given the process's low rate of survival. She had grown lonely. Then she had grown tired of being lonely, but that did not drive her into the wings of either faction. Sorry, I highlighted here. That was so interesting here. Under the influence of order magic, Dragonkind aspired to things Veranoth simply did not understand. Over the last 200 years, Valdrakken towers and spires had risen over the mountains of Thaldraxxus. In the northwest, Neltharion had built a massive citadel and forge where he and the Black Dragonflight manufactured all manner of strange wonders. On the western shores, Ysera and her greens claimed to have opened a portal into Azeroth's own dreams, which is supposed to be the Emerald Dream, which has changed a number of times. Now, I can't be sure that, crazy bronze dragon magic and other assorted craziness with time altered what it was. I can't be sure. I mean, that is one way to explain the retcons, but and in the south, Malagos and his blues have built towers and vast, what was the word for them? Libraries. They filled these places with knowledge recorded in stone and parchment from which future generations would learn. Veranoth had even torn Malagos's Grand Tower of Vakthros, as well as the beginnings of the Bronze Dragonflight's temporal conflux. Chief among them all was Alexstrasza's ruby life pools, the seat of the Red Dragonflight's power. The life pools rested at the heart of the broodlands, protected on all sides. They provided a place for whelplings to hatch, grow, and play, with no fear of predation. Every whelpling in the broodlands had their chance to reach their full potential. There was joy and hope in the thought, but also power. In a few generations' time, the dragonflight's populations might outstrip the primal dragon's numbers. The thought both astonished and terrified Veranoth. Rising from the canyons, she spotted the pool's familiar butte in the distance. Red dragons shimmered in the air around it, and gleaming pillars of marble now rose from the butte's summit. Titan-forged workers scurried across scaffoldings and moved enormous stone blocks into place. How odd, Veranoth thought. I thought the ruby life pools were complete. What are they building now? As she drew closer, a flash of crimson caught her eye. The Dragon Queen had taken wing. Light blazed off Alexstrasza's ruby scales and gilded horns. Though Veranoth had grown accustomed to seeing Alexstrasza in her ordered form, it still unsettled her from time to time. The chasm between them mostly went unspoken, but it seemed to have grown wider with each passing decade. Veranoth! Alexstrasza cried, doing a joyful, elegant roll in the air. How good it is to see you, my dear! Tell me, how have you fared of late? Very well, Veranoth replied, halting to hover in the air. You are positively glowing. I take it all in the broodlands as well? Indeed, Alexstrasza replied. We have been busy in the decades you've been away. I can see that, Veranoth replied, peering at the polished creations below. What are you up to now, my old friend? We are adding an upper tier to the ruby life pools, Alexstrasza replied. Our flights have been so prolific. We needed more space for eggs. Come, let us fly, and I will show you. Very well, Veranoth replied, but she smiled a little. Together, Veranoth and Alexstrasza cruised around the butte, enjoying the beauty of the day and the warm, gentle winds. Below them, the Titan Forge were constructing open-air pools atop the butte, which were fed from the aqueduct that carried water from Tierhold. Green dragons coaxed trees to grow, giving shade to the new pools, while the Reds oversaw construction of a new landing platform. Near the ground, young red drakes minded the whelplings, chasing them through the leafy crimson treetops. The whelplings giggled, echoed through the canyons. The sound brought another smile to Veranoth's lips. I have wanted to expand these pools for decades, Alexstrasza said with a hint of excitement in her voice. I had to prioritize the construction of Valdraken, then send resources to fortify our borders. But now I can finally bring my vision to life. Why should you need to fortify the borders of the Broodlands? Veranoth asked with a little chuckle. They banked under the bones of a new archway, one inlaid with gold and opalescent stained glass. Who would dare challenge the might of the aspects? Alexstrasza shot her friend a wry smile. Neltharia takes his charge to defend the Broodlands seriously, perhaps a little too seriously at times. You have seen the Obsidian Citadel. Ah, you mean the monument he built to his own towering intellect, Veranoth said playfully, drawing a guilty-sounding chuckle from the Dragon Queen. Not everyone is as open-minded as you, my friend, Alexstrasza said. I will always advocate for peace, but I do not trust my detractors will do the same. We do not know what dangers we may face in the future. So you do understand the threat Eridicron poses to you, Veranoth thought. Even if you will not name the threat aloud, you know the Incarnate's grown strength, just as you do. Razageth had been a particular thorn in Alexstrasza's side, as the Storm Eater had delighted in striking down ordered dragons along the Broodlands border. Razageth sometimes flew past Veranoth's eyrie in the Frozen Fangs, reveling in the power of the Tempest there. If conflict broke out between the Aspects and the Incarnates, Veranoth would grapple to maintain her neutrality. Her affection for Alexstrasza was undeniable. However, the intervening centuries had not made Veranoth trust the Keepers or their magic. Nor did she trust the Incarnates, though she certainly emphasized with some of the rhetoric. Veranoth's best hope was peace. Enough talk of philosophy, Alexstrasza said with a smile. Come, I would now introduce you to my new whelplings. Alexstrasza folded her wings and dived into the hollow center of the ruby life pools. Veranoth followed her down, plummeting past bursts of leafy green foliage and silver waterfalls. At the bottom, Alexstrasza alighted on a lily-shaped landing pad, one that floated in the shallow pool. Veranoth settled beside her friend, shaking the condensation of the waterfalls from her wings. The droplets felt almost warm. They tingled along her wing membranes until she shucked them away. The temperature rose as they ventured into the ruby life pools proper. Alexstrasza led Veranoth into a cavern that housed several large clutches of dragon eggs, red, black, blue, bronze, and green, all of which rested in clear turquoise pools. Lush flora thrived in the heat and humidity, filling the whole space with greenery. Warm golden light radiated from sconces in the walls. Draconid tended the eggs in the pools, singing to them in low, soft tones, telling them stories, and cradling them in a strange magic Veranoth did not comprehend. As Alexstrasza moved deeper into the space, every Draconid turned and bowed. She acknowledged them with a nod, saying, "As you were," and then strode onward. Few of the egg tenders looked at Veranoth warily, but said nothing. "I believe they will be sleeping." Alexstrasza approached a thick curtain of ivy and vines. She nudged it aside, revealing a private pool, one filled with gigantic lily pads and delicate glowing blooms. 10 newly hatched whelps slept on a thick velvety pad, their scales as soft as dragonfly wings. The whelps' golden irises moved back and forth under their translucent lids as they dreamed. An ornate fountain burbled a lullaby. Veranoth breathed deep, inhaling the whelp's sweet yolky scent. The whelps curled together for security, but one boy had rolled away, sleeping on his back and kicking one tiny leg in the air. With a gentle trill, Alexstrasza nudged him back into his siblings. She nuzzled them, then blew a hot breath over their sleeping forms. One whelp, still snoring, reached up and placed a tiny forepaw on Alexstrasza's snout. "Oh, they are beautiful," Veranoth said in a hushed voice, realizing that she missed having whelps of her own. Her throat tightened as she said, "Congratulations." The sudden rush of emotion took Veranoth by surprise, particularly longing and want, tinged with something that was almost jealousy. Veranoth hadn't had a clutch of her own in centuries, nor had she taken a new mate since Galakron slew her last one. "Thank you," Alexstrasza said, smiling at the new whelplings. Veranoth stepped back from her emotions, examining them, confused by them. Jealousy was not something a dragon like Veranoth experienced. She possessed a keen intellect, powerful ice magic, and excellent acuity in the air. Larger than most primal dragons, Veranoth commanded respect and admiration from her peers. She wanted for nothing. Though she was inclined to solitude, she had never lacked for friends or allies. At least, until now. Who was left for Veranoth? So many of Dragonkind's best has gone to Alexstrasza and Aspes. Most who remain now follow Eridicron and spouted his fractious rhetoric, leaving Veranoth caught in the midst of a growing storm. Precious few remained neutral, and those who were too young and inexperienced, or had paired off and flown far, seeking escape from the tensions between the two groups. Yes, Veranoth was jealous of Alexstrasza, and self-aware enough to realize that the jealousy had started to gnaw away at her heart. If left to fester, it would turn to anger, hatred. She wanted what Alexstrasza had. Not just a mate, not just a clutch, but a place in this world. Eventually, she would have to choose, aspect or incarnate, order or nature. She knew the choice wasn't upon her yet, but it stalked closer by the day. "Veranoth?" Alexstrasza asked, pulling the prost dragon from her thoughts. "Are you all right?" The concern on the Dragon Queen's face was true. The drawn brows, the neutral lips, the slightly narrowed eyes. But Veranoth couldn't bring herself to be honest or vulnerable with Alexstrasza. Try as she might, the Dragon Queen would not understand the conflict raging in Veranoth's heart. and she was loath to put her struggles on Alexstrasza today, thus dampening her friend's joy. Veranoth touched her snout to Alexstrasza's shoulder. It is wistfulness for a past I cannot forget, and nothing more, my friend. Alexstrasza held Veranoth's gaze for several moments, searching her eyes. Veranoth felt as though her chest had been laid open, and that Alexstrasza could see every beat of her heart. It was unsettling, unnerving. At long last, Alexstrasza smiled and leaned into Veranoth's side. We have been friends through all the long centuries, Veranoth. You know you can tell me anything, don't you? I do, Veranoth said, leaning into Alexstrasza. Anything but this. As Alexstrasza attended to her official duties that afternoon, Veranoth lingered in the broodlands, playing with the older whelps. You can't find me, little green Atranius giggled from the branches of a nearby tree. Veranoth stood at an egg-tender's path nearby, pretending not to know where the whelpling hid. 2 red whelplings perched on her head, Talonstraws and Lolliastraws, siblings. A blue whelpling, Rygos, toddled in the air near Veranoth's left shoulder, his tiny wings barely able to keep him aloft. He's up here, Lolliastraws said, bouncing atop Veranoth's head. Look, in the tree. Which tree? Veranoth said, pretending to be confused. She turned her gray head from side to side, then pointed at a tree across the river with a large wing talon. Is it that one? No, the whelplings cried in unison. Veranoth said, cocking her head. She turned around and pointed at the other. What about that one? The whelplings howled with laughter. Talonstraws jumped into the air, fumbled for a moment, then managed to maneuver himself in front of Veranoth's snout. Here, I'll show you, he said, motioning to her with one of his forefeet. With a chuckle, Veranoth followed the whelpling to the tree, while Talonstraws, Lolliastraws, and Rygos flew up into the branches, giggling and calling Tyrannus's name. The little green squawked, and the 4 of them burst from the tree in an explosion of leaves. Tyrannus took a tumble, but Veranoth extended her wing and caught him on the thick, soft membrane. He bounced once, looked up at her in round-eyed surprise, and laughed. Veranoth had often played these kind of games with her own clutches. It taught whelplings how to use sound to search for their prey, how to hide themselves to avoid being seen, and how to hunt alone and in groups. Veranoth had to admit it was a delight to spend some time with the whelplings, even if they were not her own. Inexplicably, there were fewer whelplings in the Dragon Wilds these days. Who wants to hide next? Veranoth asked, bouncing a Tyrannus back into the air. Talonstraws? Lolliastraws? No, Lolliastraws said, landing on Veranoth's head and hiding in the frost dragon's thick mane. I'm too scared to be alone. What? Veranoth asked with a chuckle. Why should you be afraid, little one? I want to stay with you, Lolliastraws replied, burrowing against Veranoth's neck. Bemused, Veranoth replied, Well, I suppose you can help me look. Talonstraws? I don't want to hide either, the little red dashed under Veranoth's wing. They might take me. What are you talking about? Veranoth said with a forced chuckle. In all her years, she had never seen whelplings act like this, and their fears gave her pause. Who are they? The ice and the rocks, Lolliastraws said in a muffled voice, gripping the pineapple dragon's mane in her tiny talons. Veranoth looked askance at a nearby red draconid. The creature lifted its shoulders in a shrug. Her frown deepened. Young whelplings sometimes had strange ideas, but it was true. But in the broodlands, they did not need to fear predation like they did in the wilds. The Order dragons raised their young communally, and the red dragon light ensured that all whelplings were cared for, loved, and protected. From what Veranoth understood, parents were allowed to be as involved or as uninvolved in their offspring's lives as they wanted. Red dragons lounged on ledges overhead, while Draconid patrolled the ravines and kept a watchful eye on the whelplings. No predators could get close to these little ones, at least nothing large enough to hurt them. So, why were they afraid? You are safe here in the Broodlands, Vernoth told the whelplings, nudging Talonstraws with her snout. He clung to her leg. Nothing will hurt you here. Talonstraws turned up his big golden eyes to look at her. The trust in his expression melted her heart, just a little. There are creatures that hide in the rocks. I've seen them. They took me when I was little. Took you? Vernoth asked. Took you from where? From home, Talonstraws replied. Come now, Vernoth said gently, though the conversation put her nerves on a talon's edge. Eyes in the rocks? Whelplings who believe they've been kidnapped? You have nothing to fear. Talonstraws shook his head. Fine, I'll hide, Rigo said, shooting a little puff of arcane fire at Alexstrasza. Little Red made an annoyed chirp as Rigo disappeared through a stone archway. Despite her concerns, Vernoth spent the rest of a very happy afternoon with the whelplings, playing their invented games, watching them hunt bugs, and asking them about their lives in the Broodlands. She tried to cajole Alexstrasza or Talonstraws to tell her more of their fears, but both whelplings just squeezed their eyes shut and shook their heads. Truth be told, any number of things could have happened to the siblings, from getting lost in a dark cave to an encounter with something scary. None of the other whelplings Vernoth encountered suffered the same distress. Whether green or black, bronze, blue, or red, most of the whelplings Vernoth met were boisterous and content, far more so than they might have been in the Dragon Wilds even. As the sun fell toward the horizon, Vernoth said her goodbyes to the whelplings, and Alexstrasza returned to the waking shores. Vernoth, Alexstrasza said, landing on the riverbank. The whelplings squealed in delight when they saw the queen, and she smiled at them as they swarmed around her and perched on her horns. I must apologize. Today's business took me away for far longer than I thought it would. Our half-giant neighbors aren't particularly friendly and continue to vex us. There's no need for an apology, Vernoth replied, lifting her head. 3 whelplings still clung to her mane, begging for one last game. I spent a lovely afternoon with the whelplings, but now I must be going. I am forever pulled away by my duties, Alexstrasza said with a sigh, lowering her head to allow the Draconid to collect the protesting whelps. At the very least, I could fly with you to the borders of the Broodlands. I would like that, Vernoth said. As they flew west, dusk drew her great, comforting wing over the sky. The stars blinked awake one by one. In the distance, the great forges of Notharian's obsidian citadel to burn bright. And though Vernoth had enjoyed the day, she wanted nothing more than to leave the Broodlands and return to the familiar icy halls of her home in the north. The 2 dragons paused at the border to say their goodbyes. I wish you would stay, Alexstrasza said. I can feel the loneliness in your heart, Vernoth. Ordered or not, you're always welcomed among us. My idea for the ruby light pools came from the days we spent defending our clutches from Galakrond. Came from you. Nothing would make me happier than to see you stay. A pang of longing resonated through Vernoth's chest. How she wished they could go back to that less complicated time when dragons were dragons, and they lived their lives were full of simple joys and known dangers. For even when Vernoth came to visit the Broodlands, Alexstrasza had barely had time for her. The responsibility as a leadership weighed heavily upon the Dragon Queen. Everything had changed. Everything, except Vernoth. Like the great glaciers in the north, she moved with deliberate slowness, taking years and sometimes decades to make up her mind on a matter. I cannot, Vernoth said. You have built something truly extraordinary in the Broodlands, Alexstrasza. But there is no place for me here, much as I wish there were. That is not true, Alexstrasza said, clutching her forefeet into fists. It was something she had always done when despairing. Fear enough, there is room enough for you in the Broodlands. There is room enough for everyone. Vernoff beat her wings hovering in the air. But you would not take me as I am, not truly. I would be forced to submit to the Keeper's order magic to be a part of your flights. I have shown you our advancements, our cities and towers, our forges and gardens, Alexstrasza said, her voice choked. You have sat with the aspects, played with our whelplings, flown with our finest, and shared meals with my own family. What more must I do, Vernoth, to help you understand? You are one of my oldest and dearest friends. I want you by my side. The horizon grows even darker, and I do not wish to face it without you. For the space of a heartbeat, Vernoth felt herself being taken away by the motion of the moment. She saw that path splayed before her, a community, a mate, whelplings. But at what cost? Would it be so easy to compromise her beliefs, to trade them for happiness? But she would have to live that happiness in a different skin. Whatever brood she had would be yoked to that choice. Veranoth would not make that choice for them. And the flights, they owed something to the keepers, the defense of the world, or so they said. In practice, Veranoth feared that it would mean relinquishing herself for the greater good. It would mean giving them the ice in her veins and the wind under her wings, and that was not a sacrifice she was willing to make. She was Veranoth, now and always. No one would take that away from her, not even her oldest and dearest friend. I am sorry, Alexstrasza, Veranoth said, but I cannot follow you toward that horizon. And with that she closed her wings and dived for the border, leaving Alexstrasza alone in the skies. She thought she heard the Dragon Queen call her name, but Veranoth did not turn back. So several turns in the moons, Veranoth tried not to think of that day at the Ruby Life Pools, nor how Alexstrasza had asked her to join the 5 flights. She could not imagine allowing Titan magic to change her, even if it would allow her to stay by Alexstrasza's side. The keepers found Veranoth and her primal kin wanting. They found the whole of the world wanting, which is why they forced their order upon it. But the planet was already perfect in its innate beauty. Why should it be forced to submit to the Titan's whims? Why should Alexstrasza and her flights hold the Titan's views so much higher than those of her own kind? After all, hadn't the illustrious Tyr failed to defeat Galakrond? Haven't 5 primal dragons working together found a way to fell that beast? And if Veranoth knew the story true, then why did Alexstrasza feel that she needed the Titan's power at all? How had her own strength not proven sufficient? These were the thoughts that rolled in Veranoth's mind, day in and day out, as seasons passed. While she could certainly understand the aspect's desire for greater power, it seemed naive to trust the keepers. Hadn't their Titan Forge trapped and captured primal dragons in the north? Even if Alexstrasza and the other aspects had fought to free those poor creatures, the damage had been done. It was obvious the Titans and their creations saw dragonkind as little more than servants, or worse, as thralls. Perhaps that's why the flight's oaths gave Veranoth such pause. She would not serve a force she neither knew nor understood. Could Alexstrasza say truthfully that her keepers would never ask her to do something she disagreed with? And if it came to that, what then? One afternoon, Veranoth could not sit with these thoughts any longer. She left her eyrie and took wing. The cold, icy gales that whipped around the peaks were a panacea to her, easing her troubled heart and chasing away her doubts. Overhead, the clouds rumbled and roiled. Webs of lightning raced along their bellies, an unusual sight this far to the north, where the air was usually too cold to produce such phenomenon. The snow had yet to fall, but she could sense the blizzard swirling in the skies above. Veranoth reveled in the storm that swirled around the mountain tops, enjoying the fierce frozen day. The sheer power of the storm was a delight, and perhaps in one dark small corner of her heart, Veranoth could understand why Alexstrasza might seek a stronger wind under her wings. Regardless, the Dragon Queen should have sought such power from the world itself, not from an external force. As Veranoth soared across one of the peaks, enjoying the wind in her mane, a familiar voice thundered from the clouds. Veranoth! I did not realize you enjoyed chasing the gales. Is that you, Razagath? Veranoth halted, turning her attention skyward. It wasn't unusual for the incarnate to follow the winds across the dragon wilds. With a laugh like the crackle of lightning, a large primal dragon dipped from the clouds. For a dragon so young, Razagath nearly matched Veranoth in size. Part of that was due to having been imbued with the very element of storm, no doubt. Rumors said the Storm Eater was capricious, volatile, but Veranoth had never sensed any malice from the incarnate. On the contrary, Razagath seemed to exude a wild glee, a feeling that Veranoth had expressed little of late. Who else but me? Razagath said, tossing her head. Sparks snapped between her four great horns. I hope you do not mind the unannounced intrusion, but I'm here to follow the storm and naught else. But since you are here, would you like to fly with me? Fly with you? Veranoth said, giving her wings a great beat to rise higher in the skies. And where shall we go? Anywhere we want, Razagath said with a grin. Let us see how great a gale we can whip up with our wings. Let us make the greatest of blizzards to shake the sky. It sounded like the right sort of distraction to take Veranoth's mind off the concerns that had tormented her for so long. So, with a nod of her head, she followed Razagath into the maelstrom. They spent a thrilling afternoon racing through those peaks, stirring the storm into a frenzy. The winds howled in Veranoth's ears and tore at her wings. They ducked and dived, spiraling through the storm. The snows raged, each flake sharp enough to shred a lesser dragon's wings. Lightning arced through the sky, answering the incarnate's call. Razagath challenged Veranoth to wild, death-defying games. They would plunge toward the ground, and at the last to halt their descent would be declared the victor. Veranoth lost this game every time. She was far more cautious than the Storm Eater. However, Veranoth often bested the incarnate with breakneck paces through the peaks, sometimes dodging past great bolts of lightning to win. Razagath was not trying to harm her, but the incarnate wasn't afraid of alarming the older dragon either. Despite the chill of the storm, and her companion's rather unnerving penchant for danger, Veranoth's blood burned in her veins. Her heart pounded in her chest. She could not recall a time in which she had felt so alive, not in many, many long years. No, not just alive, liberated, free. She stopped thinking about her loneliness, about the aspects and the incarnates, and about their keepers and their loathsome order magic. She stopped thinking, stopped worrying, and just lived. As the day began to die, Veranoth and Razagath let the storm ebb. They landed on a ledge just north of Veranoth's eyrie, watching the wind settle and the snows drift away. You realize you could become as I am, Razagath said, giving her a shake. Incarnate, ever powerful. Did Iridikron tell you to say that to me? Veranoth said without malice. No, Razagath said shallow. I merely sense that you are a kindred spirit. I have friends in all the far-flung corners of the world, but few of them revel in the storm as you. Fewer still can bear the wrath of my maelstroms. Veranoth turned her head to the sky, watching the storm continue to ease into a gentle snowfall. It's been many long years since I felt so free. Perhaps that is because you are listening to your instincts rather than fighting them, Razagath said. Can you imagine how much more free you'd feel after being imbued with the elements? Her features twisted into a smile. It is dangerous, very dangerous, But I believe you have what it takes to embrace the elements and master their powers, should you choose so. The suggestion gave Veronoth pause, then Razageth continued. However, it matters not what you are to me, so long as you love the storm. Friends? Veronoth's breath caught in her throat, but otherwise she made no outward sign of her surprise. Friends, just like that. Veronoth barely knew Razageth, but perhaps there was a kinship there, forged in storm, and understanding, and acceptance. Friends, she said with a nod. The incarnate grinned. Come then, she said, launching herself back in the air. I will show you stronger winds, and we shall surely fly free. A season passed, then two. Before long, Alexstrasza realized she had not seen nor heard from Veronoth in a year's time. They used to make it a habit of meeting for a hunt once a season, but Alexstrasza's duties had become even more demanding of late, and Veronoth had been less inclined to leave the comforts of her territories in the north. The realization came as a shock as Alexstrasza listened to a report from Ignian, the flight leader of Neltharion's Shadow Scales, a fledgling military wing dedicated to gathering information on the enemy. As he reported that Veronoth had been spotted in the company of Razageth the Storm Eater, every eye in the seat turned to Alexstrasza, gauging her reaction. The news cut her heart to the quick, though she didn't let the emotion show in her face. Did Veronoth truly prefer the company of a creature as cruel and as unpredictable as Razageth? An incarnate? Alexstrasza knew Veronoth was lonely, and she knew her duties had often made it impossible to visit her friend as much as she would have liked. But Razageth? How could Veronoth even entertain the idea of befriending an incarnate? Farak had made threats against Alexstrasza's very life. Razageth was no better, hunting and killing ordered dragons for sport. Have our hearts truly grown so far apart? Alexstrasza wondered, turning her gaze northwest as the other aspects prepared to take their leave. She walked to the edge of the seat, stepping out into the afternoon light, barely able to sense the strength of the sun on her scales. Was there anything Alexstrasza could do to keep her friend from following the incarnates down such a cruel, crooked path? What could she say that has not already been said? She sat, staring down at the bustling street below. Everything she did was in service of the dragonflights, and by extension for the well-being of Azeroth. Over the last 2 centuries, Veronoth had seen what the dragonflights had wrought. Was it not proof of the goodness of ordered magic? Why did Veronoth continue to believe that the Keepers meant their world harm? But more important, how could Veronoth choose the Incarnate's cruelty over the Dragonflight's hope, over their compassion? It made no sense. Talons clicked on the floor behind her. Alexstrasza? Neltharion asked. May I have a word? Of course, Alexstrasza said, turning as Neltharion joined her on the platform. Is something troubling you? I could ask you the same question. He took a seat beside her and stared out at the horizon. I wanted to apologize for the Shadow Scales reports. I should have had them deliver the intelligence concerning Veronoth to you privately, rather than before an audience. It's quite all right, Alexstrasza replied, though the situation was anything but. Veronoth is one of the oldest and wisest primal dragons left in existence. Eridikron knows this as well as I do. No doubt he seeks to weaponize her against me, but I will not. Her words grew stiff and stuck in her throat. She swallowed down her emotion, then said, I will not allow that to happen. To have Veronoth turn against us would be a great loss, Neltharion said. No doubt Eridikron wishes to see her become an incarnate. Alexstrasza shuddered. I cannot imagine she would choose such a path, but perhaps I no longer know her as I once did. I never would have imagined her befriending Razageth of all creatures. We should discourage her from joining Eridikron if we can, the black aspect said. Do you think it possible to salvage your friendship with her? I do hope so, Alexstrasza said, then let out a great sigh. I will send an emissary to the Frozen Fangs today and invite her to hunt with me. I will also have the shadow scales monitor her movements more closely, Lotharian said, lifting his head. While an incarnate cannot hope to match the power of an aspect, we certainly do not need any more of them to contend with. I wish I could find a way to reach her heart, Alexstrasza said, casting her gaze back to the horizon. It felt like a betrayal, but perhaps this was the way Vernoth had felt when Alexstrasza had become an aspect, like she could no longer understand one of her oldest and dearest friends. You must, Neltharion said. Vernoth is seen as a paragon of wisdom in the Dragon Wilds. If she joins Iridikron's cause, especially as an incarnate, many will follow her example. We cannot risk that, especially now that Tyr's forces are scattered in the wake of war with the Winterscorn. I know, my old friend, Alexstrasza said. I will think of something. I promise. In the meantime, Neltharion said, we should discuss the new tribe that has taken up residence in the Apex Canopy. Alexstrasza cocked her head. It isn't another tribe of Desjardins, is it? No, not this time, thankfully, Blast Aspect replied. While the Kalashi and the Zakali tribes have been in the Waking Shores for as long as Alexstrasza could remember, they had grown more aggressive in recent years. This new species pose our kind very few risks for now, Neltharion said. They are smaller, softer, and short-lived. Nosdormu and I would like to try to contact them. Nosdormu? Alexstrasza asked. What interest does he have in the business of the Waking Shores? Neltharion hesitated and then said, Nosdormu believes their kind will flourish and spread throughout Azeroth by the millions. He says they will have a significant hand in shaping the fate of our world. They are mortal, Alexstrasza replied, bemused. Sentient as they may be, how can such a fragile creatures hope for so grand a legacy? Though their lifespans are brief, they appear to be hardy and adaptable, Theron replied. I have watched their hunting parties work together to kill creatures 10 times their size. In larger numbers, they could be a threat, especially if Iridikron finds a way to turn them against us. Be careful, old friend, she said with a chuckle. You're starting to jump at shadows. He huffed, giving her a sideways glance. And yet here we are, concerned your dearest friend will join the Incarnates in their campaign against you. Neltharion's words struck Alexstrasza like a bolt from above. She stepped back with a gasp, heart crackling, surprised by the violence of her reaction to the Earth Warder's words. Alexstrasza wasn't angry at him, no, but angry at her powerlessness to convince even her old friend of the goodness and nobility of her cause. She shook out her wings to rid herself of the first sparks of anger. You've always had a knack for cutting to the heart of the matter, haven't you? I consider it a talent, he said with a chuckle. She gave him a wry smile. No, you are right, as you so often are. Summon Nosdormu, then, and let us make plans on how best to approach our newest neighbors. As a side note, I'm not sure that the newcomers are like the humans. I don't think they're the centaur. Oh, I see. It's coming up, the trolls. Okay. It's coming up. I just like pre-read here for a moment. It's trolls coming up. All right. The mortals had built a small settlement in the Apex Canopy far in the south of the Waking Shores. A scattered assortment of primitive huts huddled along the waterways, hidden in shadows of towering red bluffs and lush, verdant canopies. Alexstrasza touched down on the eastern cliff of Genesis Falls, cloaked in one of Malagos's illusionary spells. Never one to be left out, Malagos had insisted upon joining his fellow aspects, granting each one a limited measure of invisibility. Alexstrasza prevailed upon Ysera to join them as well, though the green aspect was keen to returning to the dream. The Lifebinder peered down at a mortal settlement charmed. These creatures walked on two legs, similar in size to a tesseract, but with lankier, more hunched frames. Instead of scales, they had inky blue flesh and bright, vibrant tufts of hair on their heads. They crouched round a fire, communicating in a guttural language and making gestures with three-fingered hands. Whelps used rudimentary taps to fish along the waterways, while 4 or 5 adults worked together to descale a basilisk. Ysera cruised high overhead, no more than an emerald shimmer in the sky. "Do you know from where they migrated?" Alexstrasza asked as Neltharion landed on her right side. He, too, looked like nothing more than a shadow in the air. Malagos joined him a moment later, his expression amused. "There are reports of similar creatures in the south," the Earth Warder replied. "Those civilizations are reportedly larger and better established than the village you see." "Fascinating," she said, watching a whelp carry a fish in a basket. With a joyful shriek, it leapt up from the riverbank to carry its prize back to its elders. Ysera did a loop around the settlement, then landed at Alexstrasza's other side. "This is a very young race, but a peaceful one," she said, lifting her head and speaking directly to Neltharion. "If anything, I should like to issue an edict to forbid the flights from interfering with their development." "Tell that to Nostormu," Neltharion said with a snort. "The mortals may not be peaceful for long." The bronze aspect joined them, whipping up the dust as he lowered himself beside Ysera. "In time, their civilizations will flourish. We should handle these first interactions with care, as they may have long-lasting implications for our flights." Neltharion sat, considering the little village. "We approach the Jarden as we are, only to be met with deadly force. We should employ a different strategy with the mortals." "Go on," she prompted. "I've considered making contact through the Titan Forge," Neltharion replied. "Even a draconid would be less threatening than a full-grown dragon." Nostormu made a humming sound, thinking. "That's assuming we can decipher their language and teach it to the Titan Forge in a reasonable amount of time." "The Titan Forge weren't built for diplomacy," Malagos said with a chuckle. "Look what happened with the Winter Scorn. I suppose we could work with Tyr to design something more suitable for the cause, though I believe he's been rather busy with his own wars of late." "That is precisely the problem," Neltharion said. "Could we send one of your king constructs to them, Malagos?" Alexstrasza asked, looking to the blue aspect. "Perhaps you could fashion one that resembles their kind." "I suppose," the blue aspects replied. "But if Nostormu speaks true, we may wish to find a more convenient way to fraternize with mortals, something a bit more permanent." The group fell silent for a moment, considering their options. Ysera cocked her head, watching 2 whelps playing on the riverbank. "What better way to understand them than to become like them?" Ysera said after a long moment. "Even if only in their visage." "In their visage," Alexstrasza repeated under her breath. "What a curious thought. And perhaps one that could have originated from a mind that spent most of its time in the ever-shifting realms of the Emerald Dream." "Malagos, would it be possible?" "You would wish to abase yourself and become like a mortal, my queen?" Malagos asked, lifting a brow. "Come on, it isn't an abasement," Alexstrasza replied. "Ysera is right. A temporary adoption of a mortal form will allow us to emphasize with and better understand their condition." "Mortal forms might have their uses," Neltharion mused, "particularly if the mortal races are as prolific as Nostormu claims. We'll want our intelligence agents monitoring their movements, and that will be easier if we can mimic their forms." Malagos sighed. "I suppose I could do some research. For now, let us test the limits of what illusionary magic can do. The aspects spent the remainder of the afternoon on the bluffs, debating how to attempt a mortal form, or visage. Working together, they wove illusionary magics with varying results. They first turned Neltharion into a towering mortal creature, one who stood taller than the keepers. Next, they managed to turn Alexstrasza into a smaller one, but her limbs were covered in crimson scales. Though Malagos projected annoyance, Alexstrasza thought his eyes glowed a little brighter with each failed attempt. As the sun began to set, splashing bright fire along the horizon, the blue aspect sat back at his haunches and rubbed his chin with his talons. Illusions are insufficient, he said, eyeing Ysera's now massive illusionary mortal form. The green aspect's proportions weren't quite right. Her arms were far too long, dragging on the ground. The green aspect waved her ridiculous limbs around, sending Alexstrasza into a whelpish fit of giggles. Even Neltharion let out an amused snort. With a touch of sadness, the life-binder realized that it had been years since she had laughed with so much abandon. Tyr had told her that her position required dignity, majesty, and 100 worries always weighed on her mind. Rare was the moment when she was able to be just Alexstrasza. Malagos rubbed his chin with his knuckles, thinking aloud. This will need something different, I think. For this to work with the desired effect, the magic will need to be deeply personal, individual. Before the blue aspect could finish, a chorus of shrieks echoed through the skies. Alexstrasza turned her gaze up. Panic spread through the aspect's attendants, fast as wildfire. Her smile faded as she watched her major domo, Sarastraz, dive for the butte. He landed elegantly before the lifebinder, dipping his head to her. Fear rolled off his body like summer heat. My queen, we receive word from Valdraken. What? Neltharion said, charging toward them as Ysera reverted back to her draconic form. What has happened? It's Tyr, Sarastraz said. He's fallen. Fallen? Alexstrasza's eyes widened. She recoiled, her heart clattering through her chest. She looked to Ysera, who stood stunned and blinking tears away. No, it can't be. He can't be dead. How? It matters not at the moment, Neltharion replied as the other aspects joined them, the heartbreak clear on their faces. We cannot let this information become common knowledge. Tyr was our greatest benefactor, Ysera said, and the grief in her voice was as deep as the dream itself. He helped to make us who and what we are. If this news is true, I do not wish to erase his memory. We should celebrate his many contributions and honor his life. I agree, Neltharion said, turning back to Alexstrasza. But Iridikron must not learn of this development. Our alliance with Tyr and the other keepers was a great source of strength for the Broodlands. The recent wars have decimated the Titan Forged. And if Tyr is gone... Alexstrasza closed her eyes and bowed her head. Then Iridikron will have reason to strike, she said, drawing in a deep breath. Very well. Let us return to Valdraken at once. Far to the north, the skies were bruised and clouds deepened the afternoon to dusk. Iridikron slitted his eyes against the storm's fury. The stone-scaled was cautious, even as Zenger. He had watched Razageth's fury knock full-grown dragons from the sky, plucked ancient trees from the ground by their roots, and with his help stirred massive waves to strike the northern shores. The high winds tore at his wings, but his scales were hard and heavy as stone, giving him stability in Razageth's storm. Even so, he was never truly safe in her tempests. Razageth, he thought, narrowing his eyes against the high winds. What are you doing, whelp? The Storm Eater knew not to unleash her storms this close to Harrow's Deep, where she could disrupt the delicate, dangerous work Iridikron and his wing leaders performed underground. Like the incarnate herself, Razageth's storms were unpredictable, wild. Today her thunder had echoed into the very heart of Harrow's Deep, thwarting an attempt to shift the bones of the earth in the east. Disgruntled, Iridikron had gone to confront the Storm Eater himself. Razageth would not listen to a wing leader when she rarely listened to Iridikron. At best, a lackey would be ignored. At worst, they would be killed. Iridikron would not sacrifice the lives of his commanders to Razageth's unpredictability. Razageth, called over the high winds, cease this storm! If Razageth could hear him, she did not respond. Instead, she boomed, Did you think to return to us to throw yourself upon our mercy? I will tell every last scale from your hide. I will kill you for what you have done. A pained scream cut through the night. The cry was not Razageth's. It sounded familiar, but Iridikron could not quite place its timbre in the storm. He scented blood on the air, but the snow reduced visibility. Curious, Iridikron skirted outer gales, circling Razageth and her prey. With a roar, Razageth shot great bolts of lightning from her horns, electrifying a small dragon. The dragon seized, its wings stretched wide in agony, neck arching. The brilliance of the light seared a peculiar silhouette into Iridikron's sight. That was an ordered black dragon, a small one, but one from Neltharion's flight nonetheless. The dragon plummeted through the air for several seconds before regaining consciousness, opening their wings and weakly halting their descent. What business did one of the ordered have so far north and alone? Ordered dragons usually traveled in packs of 5 or 6, particularly when flying through the dragon wilds. Had the aspect sent a spy, hoping the little dragon would be overlooked? No, something else is at play here, Iridikron mused. He had no doubt that Neltharion had pawns in Harrow's Deep. He would expect nothing less of the Earth Warder. No matter how often his so-called Dragon Queen declared peace, Iridikron and Neltharion had already begun a deadly dance for supremacy and survival. Razageth dived. Another scream tore through the storm, but this time a familiar scent cropped into Iridikron's snout, one he had known since his days as a whelp. Icronia? He wondered, cruising closer. Sister? No, it cannot be. Iridikron's anger bubbled from the deep, dark cockles of his stone heart and cooled into something unbreakable and black. That little soft scale. Iridikron hadn't seen his clutch sister in so long he thought her dead. Perhaps it would be better if she were. Had he not warned her about the dangers of order magic? Did she not understand how such magic shackled her to the whims of an unknowable force? They could not know what the Titans would ask of them, nor how deep the stain of order magic ran. Iridikron had half a mind to let Razageth kill Icronia for her betrayal. The stone-scaled circled closer, watching Razageth continue to torment the smaller dragon. Despite his cold fury, Iridikron could see an opportunity in this situation, too. He could study Icronia, thus learning more about the aspects and their abilities. Or perhaps he could send her right into Neltharion's ranks. Either way, she was worth more to the incarnates alive. If he saved her life, she would be a perfect pawn. Razageth, Iridikron thundered, release my sister at once. The Storm Eater halted her assault, turning her gaze on Iridikron. Icronia called out to him, her voice hazy with pain. The little dragon could barely keep herself aloft, but Iridikron felt no pity for her. She had made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences or die by them. Icronia has betrayed you, the Storm Eater replied, tossing her head. Now she thinks she can throw herself on your mercy. I will not allow it. That is not your decision to make, Iridikron said. The storm around them roared. Razageth pivoted in the air, lightning snapped between her massive horns. Will you try to stop me? She asked with a wild laugh. Will you save an ordered dragon from her fate? Your sister deserves death. We should kill her now and send her corpse back to her keepers. Iridikron growled in response. Has your heart grown soft, stone-scaled? Razagath snapped. Lightning danced across her mane. Or perhaps your sympathies now lie with the keepers. Let us see. Razagath flapped her wings forward, shooting great bolts of lightning at Acronia. The lightning consumed the little black dragon, and she shrieked with pain. With a roar, Iridikron pumped his great wings, spiraled in the air, and then turned and dived. In the glare of her own lightning, the Storm Eater did not see him coming. Iridikron slammed into Razagath, hooking his talons into her hide. Her lightning coursed through his frame, ineffective against stone. She shrieked and lashed at him, her talons glancing off his chest. "Release me!" she bellowed. "No!" Iridikron closed his wings. Razagath could not support their combined weight. Together they dropped like a stone, hurtling toward the forest below. If Iridikron wanted to subdue the Storm Eater, he needed to force her to the ground. The same stone scales that protected him from Razagath's fury were a disadvantage in aerial combat. Razagath thrashed and shrieked in Iridikron's grip. The earth rushed toward them. Iridikron released her with a kick to the underbelly, sending her sprawling into the snow-capped trees. Iridikron opened his wings and caught the winds racing over her head. Razagath tumbled into a clearing, covered in mud, snow, and brush. The scent of fresh sap filled the air. He banked and landed nearby. The earth trembled beneath him. On the far side of the clearing, Acronia collapsed into a snowdrift and did not move. Iridikron would deal with her next. With a wild, half-choked roar, Razagath pushed herself to her feet. She shook her head and slammed her wing talons into the ground, sending snow spraying in all directions. "You will pay for that!" she screamed. "Yield," Iridikron said. "Your storms cannot break stone." "Never!" Razagath shrieked. She opened her wings and tried to leap into the air, but Iridikron tapped a wing talon on the ground. The gravitational forces shift underfoot. Razagath faltered, then crashed back into the snow with a grunt. She tried to leap aloft again, only to stumble forward. Razagath glared at him. "What are you doing to me?" She shook snow off her snout and growled. "Yield, Razagath," Iridikron replied. "I have no desire to fight you." The Storm Eater snarled, her lips curling. "Let me kill the runt, and I will." "No, I have use for Acronia yet," Iridikron said. "Can you not see how she could be a great boon to our cause? Calm your storms, sister. She will meet her just fate in time, but only after she has exceeded her use." The Storm Eater grumbled, though her howling winds settled. The snow continued to fall, gently now, forming a thin layer on Iridikron's wings and scales. "I expect you to repay me 100-fold, Iridikron. I want to hear our enemies' screams echoing through the broodlands." "And you shall, my friend," Iridikron replied, turning towards Acronia's motionless form. "Where did you find my wayward sister?" "Nearby," Razagath replied. "She wanted to throw herself at your feet and beg for your mercy. Can you imagine?" "Do you know how she came to be ordered?" Iridikron asked as he strode toward the little dragon. Acronia continued to breathe, but barely. "No," Razagath replied, following him. They paused beside Acronia's bleeding form. "Does it matter? The betrayal is the same." "It may," Iridikron said. I would be very interested to know if Acronia was forced or coerced to accept order magic, or if she made that choice of her own free will. She seems very naive," Razagath replied with a hiss. "I will never understand how the two of you came from the same clutch." Was all Iridikron said with a response. Acronia had always allowed others to do her thinking for her, which was less of an issue when she listened to someone with wisdom and discretion. She would make a poor spy, but still, Iridikron did not want her in Harrow's Deep. It would not do to have an ordered dragon seen among his ranks. So, Iridikron moved his sister into a small cavern near his lair. He covered her wooden body in a blanket of soft earth, filled the deepest scores in her hide with silt, and set her broken legs and tail with stone braces. He coaxed magma into the room, warming the space. While he worked, he thought about how to best to weaponize his sister against the aspects. Hey, Rakachino. Thanks for joining. Good moment to wet the whistle a little bit. I'm not used to talking for long stretches of time and then being sick didn't help. All right. Over the last 2 centuries, Iridicron had worked quietly to undermine the Aspects' work in the Broodlands. Most recently, he and his wing leaders shifted the Earth and caused quakes, disrupting the Dragonflight's work. More important, Iridicron subverted the Aspects in the Dragon Wilds. He and his followers spoke to their kind about the effects of order magic, claiming the flights pushed primal dragons out of their hunting grounds, and blamed everything from strange weather patterns to vanishing dragons on the ordered dragons. It was made all the easier to recruit followers when the Aspects mostly hid within their borders. As for Veranoth, well, he had made plans for her too. The ice dragon had a beneficent streak he meant to exploit, and the more she felt the Aspects were harming the primal dragons, the better. He would give Veranoth good reason to turn against the Dragon Queen in time. He needed the right pawn, the right ambassador, to take the primal dragon's complaint to the ice dragon. Razagath, too, could help him on this front. The Storm Eater was known for her excursions around the Dragon Wilds and beyond, and she had a wide web of friends in far-flung places. The friendship between Razagath and Veranoth had grown apace, and it was one upon which Iridicron meant to capitalize. Razagath watched from the cavern's threshold unamused. Ecronia is too weak to be of any use to our cause, Iridicron. The whelp can't fight. Wars are not won on the battlefield, Razagath, but in hearts and minds, Iridicron said quietly. Ecronia may serve well on that front, provided she is given the proper direction. The Storm Eater stalked into the cavern, making a disgusted noise at the back of her throat. What are you talking about? Iridicron turned, his scales rasping on the stone below him. When she wakes, take her to the borders of the Broodlands and command her to burn the villages of Terrasect or mortals. I care not. Leave enough alive to spread the word. Cry chaos. Rain fire from the skies. Make the ground quake. Draw storms down from above if you must, but only Ecronia is to be seen. Do you understand? Yes, Razagath said with a cackle. Good, Iridicron replied, stalking from the cavern. Go forth and destroy, Storm Eater. It is what you do best. For months, Razagath appeared at the entrance to Ecronia's lair once every clutch of moons. At first, Ecronia hated their nighttime forays. They would destroy a village or two at random, Terrasect or mortal. Razagath did not care. All that mattered to the Storm Eater was fire, terror, and blood. But as the season turned and the air chilled, the Terrasect's ranks began to swell at Harrow's Deep. Mortals joined them too, fleeing the destruction wrought, seemingly, at the talons of the Aspects. Even the primal dragons took note, wondering about this change in the Dragonflight's behavior. Once Ecronia caught her brother's vision, she executed her task with relish. Mortal screams echoed through the night, sharp enough to pierce Razagath's storms. Ecronia dived through the air, breathing fire from her maw, setting a cluster of straw huts aflame. The dry grasses combusted. Small creatures burst from their entrances, shrieking in terror and pain. One mortal stumbled to the ground, eaten alive by the blaze. Ecronia sped past, her wings fanning the fires into an inferno. Razagath cackled overhead, hidden in the dark, swirling skies. The Storm Eater shot lightning bolts from her perch in the clouds, bright, brilliant flashes of blue-white light. How Acronia hated the half-mad incarnate. She understood her position, how these acts were needed to prove her worth and fealty to the cause. What she did not understand was the torment she suffered at Razageth's talons. Even if Acronia followed her brother's directives, the Storm Eater might beat her anyway. Iridicron may have saved her life, but he has also condemned her to the Storm Eater's capriciousness. It was a mercy and a punishment both. Acronia should have known better. She should have let Razageth kill her the moment she saw her brother on the approach. From the shell, Iridicron's help had always come with caveats. He had been the bigger, faster, and more cunning of the two clutch mates. He had protected Acronia from the dragons who would prey upon her. But every time Iridicron saved her life, he extracted a price, a promise, a pound of scales, so to speak. But it was Razageth who carved literal scales from Acronia's hide. She endured the pain because she, too, wanted to see the aspects in their flights fall. Acronia hadn't tarried among the flights just for a season, maybe two, long enough for her to realize she'd made a mistake. They had promised her a place in the Birdlands, but this place came coupled with duty and labor. The black aspect worked his flight to exhaustion. The black dragons commanded his forges, marched in his army, and constructed his bastion. Worse, she seemed to be the only one who did not support Neltharion's fanatical commitment to his oaths. Even among the swelling numbers of the Black Dragon flight, Acronia had never felt more alone. The little black dragon wheeled in the sky. Below her, fire rampaged across the landscape, devouring everything in its path. It chewed into the forests and coughed back smoke into the air. Birds and small creatures fled the flames. Mortals shrieked and their whelps cried. To Acronia's mind, mortal lives were meaningless. Anything that was not a dragon was prey. She closed her wings and dived toward the village. Flames erupted from her maw, consuming everything in their path. With each village she burned and every life she took, Acronia defied the aspects and their keepers. She wished they could see her now, burning the village after village in their hallowed names, sowing fear and destruction along their borders. However, Iridicron had forbidden her from speaking of her mission to anyone, including Farak. Perhaps someday this charge would end, and her brother would forgive her for her mistakes. For now, she would do as her brother had bidden her. Acronia tilted her wings to better ride Razageth's ferocious currents. The Storm Eater demanded the total annihilation of the mortal villages, with perhaps one or two survivors spared. Someone had to spread the news that Alexstrasza's dragonflights were cruel, murderous creatures bent on the destruction of non-draconic races. Several mortals had already managed to escape the glittering inferno. Acronia landed in a large central clearing. The smell of charred wood and burning flesh filled her nostrils, heady and intoxicating. The screams of the dying had quieted, leaving her alone with the roar and the fire and the howl of Razageth's winds. Movement drew her gaze to the left to a gap between huts. A mortal whelp stumbled into view, tripping over its own feet and tumbling to the ground. When Acronia turned toward it, the whelp screamed, a high, thin wail that carried over the storm. Acronia growled, flames curling around her lips. A sharp pain slammed into the side of the black dragon's head, barely missing her eye. A hefty stone thudded on the ground near her feet. With a snarl, Acronia turned, surprised to see a second mortal standing in the clearing, holding another rock in one hand. This mortal stood taller than the whelp. Its long wild hair grew past its shoulders. "Do you think you can lure me away from your whelp, little beast?" Acronia said, stalking towards the mortal. The tiny creature stood its ground, knees trembling. "It would be better for you to run." The creature spoke to the dragon in a feral, nonsensical tongue, then hurled another rock. The stone bounced harmlessly off Acronia's chest. Before the dragon could say anything more, a blue-white bolt of lightning shot from the sky, slamming into the mortal. The creature spasmed, his eyes rolled back into its head as it crumpled to the ground. A long, thin wail unspooled into the night. Now, where was the whelp? Acronia spun, seeking it. Her tail slammed into the remains of a burning hut and set a spray of cinders in the air. The whelp burst from its hiding place, took one look at its mother's corpse, then skidded to a stop. It fell to the ground with another agonized wail, one that speared Acronia's heart and shattered her bloodlust. This was not a cry of fear, but of a pain so deep it would crack the world. It was a cry of loss and something more. Loneliness. Acronia knew that feeling all too well. The dragon halted, stunned by the emotion that welled up in her chest. Kill it, Razagath's voice rumbled from the skies, her voice deep as thunder. It has seen me. Do not hesitate this time. The very sound of the Storm Eater's voice made Acronia's scars ache. Acronia! Razagath roared. With a furious shriek, Acronia struck the whelp down with her talons. She gave the little creature a clean, painless death. When she looked up, she thought she saw movement in the trees ahead. Whatever hid among the branches, she let it be. As Acronia and Razagath withdrew from the village, the little whelp's final scream haunted her. Acronia tucked it away in the shredded niche of her mind, remembering her hatred for the aspects and their false promises, then followed Razagath into the blackened horizon. In the north, Veranoth left her den for a night hunt, soaring under radiant ribbons of turquoise, green, and purple lights in the starry sky. Veranoth's mind whirled with conflicting thoughts and loyalties. Over the last few turns of the moons, Alexstrasza had been inviting Veranoth to the Broodlands with greater irregularity. Just yesterday, Alexstrasza had sent one of her messengers to the Frozen Fangs, summoning Veranoth to a feast at Wormrust Temple. Veranoth had already declined 3 such requests that season. As much as she might miss Alexstrasza, she had no desire to subject herself to more heartbreak. Alexstrasza had made her choices, and she hadn't chosen Veranoth. Then, just that morning, Razagath had appeared at Veranoth's eyrie, asking the older dragon to race her through the fangs. Now, that had been an invitation Veranoth would accept with gladness. Perhaps it meant something that, of late, she felt a greater kinship with Razagath than as Alexstrasza. But Veranoth was not ready to face that reality. True, the Storm Eater was unpredictable and prone to violence. Veranoth had tried to temper Razagath's baser instincts, teaching the Incarnate to show mercy when it was due. Whether the Storm Eater listened to her counsel, Veranoth could not say. Despite her ferocity, Razagath possessed a youthful exuberance and zest for life. She loved to summon strong winds and ride them across the landscape. She tempted Veranoth to dive in the oceans from great northern cliffs. But more than anything, Razagath loved to chase storms. She often flew north to revel in the Fang's terrible fury, often bringing Veranoth a kill for the intrusion or news from the south. Perhaps Veranoth taught Razagath temperance, but the Incarnate showed her how to make the most of every moment. Still, Veranoth could not turn her back on Alexstrasza, at least not completely. To clear her head, Veranoth flew to the northern shores, hoping to hunt the great white bears on the ice floes, or perhaps the horned whale. She craved the sweet, marbled flesh of the creatures that lived in the Fang's perpetual winter. As she cruised past the cliffs of the northernmost reaches, the seas stretched out before her, black and fathomless. Walls of sapphire blue rose straight from the waves, glowing in the bright moonlight. Icebergs speckled the waters, some as large as small islands, hosting restless seabirds and other wildlife. To her surprise, Veranoth spotted a small pack of dragons hunting fish several wing lengths off the coast. Most dragons weren't naive enough to encroach upon her territory. Huh, she thought, landing on a ledge to watch. A mottled green closed their wings and dived into the waters. Seconds later, a great whale surfaced, thrashing. Water exploded from its blowhole. A second dragon struck, raking their tails across the whale's back. Ribbons of blood spilled into the sea. The first dragon burst from the waves, a torn fin in their jaws. The whale's low, mournful cries echoed across the water. As the dragons hauled their kill to shore, Villarnoth circled overhead. She had no intention of stealing the whale, though her stomach rumbled when the scent of blood hit her nostrils. They were young, barely out of drakehood. One of the dragons, a little slate-gray female, looked up at Villarnoth, her eyes widening, snout already red with gore. She bugled a warning to her packmates. Two males, one the color of ochre, the other the mottled green of moss. Both craned their necks, looking at Villarnoth in alarm. The green one eyed Villarnoth as she landed. He lowered his gaze, but stepped in front of the other two in a protective manner. All three dragons looked as if they hadn't had a proper meal in many moons, their eyes sunken and cheeks hollow. Villarnoth could count the ochre's every rib bone. The slate gray shivered in the cold, wrapping her tail around her feet. Of the three, the mottled green looked the most hale, but even he was too wiry for a dragon of his size. Villarnoth could smell their desperation and hear the rumbling in their bellies. She pitied them, but not too much. "You cannot hunt here, young ones," Villarnoth said, stalking toward them, ice in her voice. "This is my territory." The slate-gray female backed up a step, dropping her head to protect her throat. She turned her gaze down, too. "Ancient One, these waters are yours?" "Yes, mine," Villarnoth replied. The mottled green shifted his weight, looking down at the slate-gray female. He extended a wing over her shivering form. "Could we go far over the water to hunt?" Villarnoth narrowed her eyes. "Too far, you die. Why did you come to the Fangs?" The slate-gray shivered harder. "The Ordered Ones chased us from our grounds. It's cold here, but we're hungry. So hungry." Villarnoth sighed. "You had no choice?" The slate-gray bobbled her head. Despite her loneliness, Villarnoth had no desire to share her territory with three strangers, yet she could not leave these young ones to starve either. Many dragons have gone east to the Broodlands. Those who hadn't had expanded their territories have defended them jealously, pushing younger, less experienced dragons to the fringes. Though to help but unable to stand by, Villarnoth sighed. "Very well, but you must obey my rules." The slate-gray blinked and cocked her head. "Anything," the ochre said, stepping forward. "A kill for me every 3 moons," Villarnoth said. "You will not kill for sport. You will respect my solitude and find your own lairs. Agreed?" "Yes," the mottled green said. "Good." Villarnoth spent the rest of her afternoon with the young ones. The stone-gray primal dragon was Nalacrona, the ochre, Zarnin, and the mottled green, Razvik. Villarnoth flew with them around the coast, pointing out fertile hunting grounds and potential locations for aeries and dens. As Razvik and Nalacrona inspected one such cave, Villarnoth and Sarin covered outside. In the east, the sun peeked over the horizons, gilding the mountain peaks and coloring them in soft pinks. Overhead, the skies burned orange. The cave's mouth was draped in shadows, well hidden among cliffs and crags. "Many thanks, Ancient One," Sarnan said. "Their eggs were taken twice now." "Taken?" Villarnoth narrowed her eyes. "The entire clutch? How?" "Primal parents might lose an occasional egg in the wilds, but to lose so many in a row was unusual." "Eggs gone," Sarnan said, lifting his shoulders in a shrug. "Some say the stone skins. Egg stealers." "Stone skins," Villarnoth repeated, picturing a titan forged in her mind's eye. In the broodlands, little Talonstraws and Lilistraws had been inexplicably afraid of the eyes in the rocks and being taken, and Veranoth began to wonder if those fears weren't as irrational as she had thought. Whelplings were often cognizant of their surroundings while still in the shell. If something had taken the whelplings' eggs, no, if someone had taken them from their nests, that would explain their fears. And you have seen these egg stealers? Veranoth asked. Zarnan shook his head. No, just talk. Dragon talk. Terrasek talk. Terrasek? Veranoth asked, confused. Why Terrasek? Terrasek disappear, he replied. Village is burned. She frowned. Could this be true? Neltharion had always struck Veranoth as a shrewd strategist. Like Eridicron, the black aspect could be single-minded in pursuit of his goals. If these rumors had any truth to them, perhaps someone in the Broodlands quietly sought to bolster the dragonflights while depleting the primal dragon's numbers in the wilds. It was a cruel, heartless strategy, but Veranoth could see how the aspects might leverage it against the Eridicron. But she sensed the Eridicron's presence in all this too. Nalacrona even smelled a little like the incarnate, which could mean they were related. The dragon's appearances in the fangs could be as much a chance as it could be one of Eridicron's well-constructed ploys. The stone scale did love his schemes, which was one reason why Veranoth continued to eschew his cause. It's a rumor, she told herself, nothing more. But perhaps all she wanted was to believe her own lie. Excuse me. Neltharion tapped his talons on the stone floor, annoyed. He stood in the throne room of the Obsidian Citadel with 3 of his flight leaders, discussing the latest intelligence from the west. A sculpted map of northern Kalimdor stretched out before them, which the scalesmiths had carved from a massive piece of igneous rock. Dragon-shaped ponds stood in Valdrakken and Harrowsdeep, representing the aspects and incarnate forces. Now here, okay, as a side note, this is kind of like not quite right. The dragons didn't name, or the Titans did not name the land Kalimdor. That was a loan to the Night Elves. They did not know, the dragons did not name this land, nor did the Titans. That was a loon. Alright. The throne room overlooked the entirety of the Obsidian Citadel and the valleys beyond. Overhead, the clouds burned bright orange, reflecting the fires that roared in the Citadel's forges. Columns of thick, dark smoke twisted into the sky. The ring of hammers echoed off the sharp cliffs. Black dragons dived in and out of sight, busy with their own tasks. Neltharion took great pride in the bastion his flight had built. The Obsidian Citadel was the pinnacle of the dragon's fortifications, fusing imposing form with gainful function. Over 200 years, his flight had reinforced the mountains around the citadel, turning it into a powerful bulwark against Harrowsdeep. They built grand forges, tunneled into the mountains to create vaults, and pioneered new weapons, armor, and defenses. Of the 5 dragonflights, it was the black dragonflight who pushed the martial prowess of the Broodlands forward. Today, however, those feelings were overshadowed by the news from the west. Ignian had just returned from several nights in incarnate territory. As leader of the Shadowscales, Ignian spent much of his time afield. Upon his return that morning, he added 2 more dragon pawns to Harrowsdeep, signaling another 100 dragons apiece. The growth of Eridicron's forces outpaced that of the aspects by a wide margin. Before long, they would outnumber the dragonflights 3 to 1. Eridicron was preparing for war. The quakes are increasing in intensity and frequency, my aspect, Ignian said to Neltharion. And we still cannot prove with absolute certainty that Eridicron and the primals are to be blamed for them. Nor can we stop them from affecting our territories. Calcia gestured to a map with her talons. As you know, my scalesmiths have worked with the blue dragonfly to place enchanted obelisks around the border of the Broodlands, helping to absorb the worst of the quakes, she said, tapping their western border. It lit with bright fire under her touch. However, she continued, the increased frequency of the tremors had destabilized the magma chambers beneath the waking shores. If left unchecked, we fear it will have dire consequences for the entire region. I don't need to tell any of you what will happen if the caldera beneath us explodes, Ignian said. Notharian drummed his talons on the stone floor again, harder this time, sending hairline cracks into the stone beneath his feet. On the surface, the stone-scaled appeared to be using the quakes to disrupt the aspect's progress in the Broodlands. Iridicrod's goals were rarely so superficial. Despite Notharian's wisdom and long acquaintance with the stone-scaled, they had once been close, sharing the same interest in the bones of the earth. He could not guess the incarnate's true aims. He had conjectures, assumptions, and inferences. The earth warder shifted in place, muscles aching from the weight of the world pressing in on him from all sides. He sensed the cracks that Iridicron broke into the continent, but why continued to elude him. A whisper curled at the back of Notharian's mind, sinuous as smoke. You will fail, it crooned. You have not the strength nor shrewdness to stop the stone-scaled. Notharian gave his head a little shake, but the whispers persisted. He laughs at you from the depths. They all do. Even your fellow aspects mock you, said a third. They see you for the fool you are. Turn to our power, instructed a fourth voice. We will help you crush your enemies underfoot. Iridicron is nothing compared to me, Notharian said to whispers, frustrated with their prattle. Even before he had become an aspect of the black dragonflight, these whispers began to rise from the deep dark caverns in his mind. Over the years they had increased in intensity, making Notharian question his own thoughts, his own actions. They were inescapable, omnipresent. Notharian had not told another soul about them. Not even Malagos, who had long been his closest confidant and friend. Embrace us. No! Half a growl escaped Notharian's throat. Before his flight leaders could so much lift a brow, he said, Iridicron grows more brazen by the day, and yet Alexstrasza's peace edicts binds their talons. We must find a way to push back, my liege. Vembrian, the embattled one-eyed seneschal of the Obsidian Citadel's guards, sighed as he looked over the map. The incarnates draw more mature dragons by the day, and while our whelplings will soon outnumber theirs, it will be centuries before our armies can match their maturity, skill, and might. At this rate, we will be unable to hold the western border in the event of a direct attack. I know, my old friend, Notharian said, blowing a hot breath from his nostrils. With every passing day, the incarnate's position grew stronger. Unlike Alexstrasza, Notharian did not believe the aspects would be able to make peace with the incarnates. Tyr was gone. The rest of the keepers were scattered or dead. Whatever threats arose, the aspects would face them on their own. Far to the northwest, the stone-scaled shaped the ground beneath their feet. Iridicron had warned the aspects and their dragonflights of the consequences for entering his domain, and that included its skies. So the black dragonflight monitored Iridicron's work from afar, observing and recording the earth-rattling tremors that originated from Harrow's Deep. Parak rallied primal dragons to the incarnate side, while Razageth. The Storm Eater loved nothing more than to sow discord and chaos wherever she went, and often harried the flight's patrols. Razageth had already menaced her fair share of black and green dragons along the Broodland's western borders, and yet Alexstrasza cautioned them to stay any attempt at a counterattack. Razageth wanted to incite a war. That much was clear. Notharian respected Alexstrasza's convictions. Publicly, he made pretenses for peace, backing Alexstrasza and instructing his flights not to engage with the primals. Over the years, he had sent emissaries to Harrow's Deep at the Dragon's Queen's behest. Each had been turned away. Several had been beaten, one to the verge of death. Iridicron had killed Notharian spies, refused peace talks, and spread vicious rumors about the effects of order magic on dragonkind. He claimed the flights had kidnapped legions of Terrasect and forced order magic upon them, turning them into subservient draconid. It was a lie, of course, but many were quick to choose fear over truth. Iridicron would not be reasoned with. He would set all of Kalimdor aflame before he bowed to anyone, much less to those who served the keepers. So, quietly, Neltharion prepared for war, just as Iridicron was doing. He tapped his talons on the ground a third time. Calcia, I think we can indeed push back. Develop an obelisk that sends the vibrations in the earth and emits an interfering wave of equal strength. The quakes must stop if we are to continue our work. We could do that, Calcia said, pressing one of her 4-foot knuckles into her chin, thinking. I will set to work on the prototypes myself. Good, Neltharion said. The question of our numbers is much more difficult to solve, however. It takes dragons far too long to reach adulthood. We have decades, not centuries. So we could script the eldest drakes to fight, Vembrian said. Not against fully grown dragons, Neltharion replied. Elder drakes may serve on patrols and in support roles, perhaps, but they will not be able to hold their own in the skies. Can we not breed more draconid? Egnian said. Draconid cannot fight in the skies, and they possess only limited control of magic, Neltharion replied. If we want to disrupt the primals on the battlefield, we may need to create a new type of soldier entirely. Let me think of a solution. A blaze of crimson caught Neltharion's eye. He looked up, surprised to see Alexstrasza landing on the terrace of the throne room. A second dragon alighted beside her, blue-tinged primal dragon of ice. Veranoth, Neltharion thought with a frown. Veranoth had not been seen in the Broodlands for several years. Who brought her to their territories now? Neltharion knew Veranoth by reputation alone. The primal dragon had long been friends with Alexstrasza. However, the Shadow Scales had spotted her with Razageth on more than one occasion. With conflict brewing on the horizon, a dragon of Veranoth's stature could not stay neutral for long. Neltharion did not trust her to choose order. Speak to no one of this, Neltharion said to his flight leaders of their plan. The 3 black dragons nodded to their aspect, murmuring their assent. Ignian stretched his wings over the map, turning all the pawns on its surface into shadow. Alexstrasza, Neltharion said, forcing a smile as he strode towards the terrace. What brings you to the Obsidian Citadel this day? A look at our forges for our friend Veranoth, perhaps? No, Neltharion, Alexstrasza said, her tone grim. The Dragon Queen flicked her tail back and forth, almost as if she were nervous. Nervousness was not a state which Neltharion was accustomed to seeing Alexstrasza. I fear we bring distressing news. Veranoth turned to him. A thin layer of frost grew under her feet and spread out across the floor. Perhaps you can explain, Earth Warder. Explain what? Neltharion asked, looking to Alexstrasza in confusion. His flight leaders fanned out behind him. What has happened? Alexstrasza swished her tail again, agitated. 2 nights ago, Veranoth believed she saw an ordered dragon ravaging the local Terrasect village. The entire settlement was burned to the ground. Neltharion narrowed his eyes. From which flight? He asked through his teeth. The Dragon Queen sighed, giving him a fraught look. Ah, Neltharion replied. I see. I wanted to bring these allegations to you in private rather than to the seat of the aspects, Alexstrasza said. Do you know anything of this? No, he replied, and the word rumbled through his chest like crackling stone. I have issued no such orders. The Dragon Queen held his gaze for a full heartbeat, her golden eyes sharp, intelligent, questioning. "She thinks you a liar," one of the whispers said. "Warmonger, undermining her command." "Silence," Lotharian told them. Then he said, "You know I would not lie to you, Alexstrasza." "You already lie," the whispers curled back at the back of his mind. "She knows of the weapons you forge in the dark." "And what of your flight leaders?" Alexstrasza asked, turning her attention to Ignian, Calcia, and Vembrian. "Have you seen any such behaviors from your flight?" "No, my queen," Vembrian said, bowing his head. "The Black Dragon flight is ever loyal to your decrees." "Very well," Alexstrasza replied. "Veranoth, will you tell them what your friends witnessed at our borders?" "In the autumn, I took several drakes under my wing," Veranoth said. "During the last dark moons, one of them spotted an ordered black dragon burning a Terrasec village to the ground. They say the mortals had been attacked as well." "That cannot be," Ignian said, stepping forward. "We would not attack innocents, especially unprovoked. If such a thing were happening, surely we would know about it." "Ignian," Lotharian said, his voice carrying a warning. "Few knew of the shadow scales or their mission, and the black aspect intended to keep it that way." "I flew the length of your western border," Veranoth said, "and found evidence of other sites that have also been destroyed. Many Terrasec have fled west, telling stories of dragon fire and ruined villages. I also found black scales at the several sites." Veranoth extended a collection of scales to the Earth Warder. Each one gleamed obsidian. Netharian plucked a scale from her grasp, turning it this way and that, examining it from all angles. The scale belonged to an ordered dragon. Of that there could be no doubt. Several of the scales were cracked or hatched with old claw marks. At least two looked dull, almost cloudy. "These scales did not come from a healthy dragon," Lotharian said, passing the scale to Ignian. "The scale's size and shape are consistent, however, which lead me to believe they were taken or shed from the same creature. Due to their poor condition, I would guess this dragon is not living in the Broodlands or among the flights." Alexstrasza frowned. "Are there any black dragons missing from the Obsidian Citadel?" "Perhaps," he said. "Ignian, can I trust you with this matter? Take the scales to the flight leaders. See if you can identify them." "Of course, my aspect." Ignian bobbed his head once, collected the scales, and hurried off. "In the meantime," Veranoth said, "I will take you to the burned villages if you wish." Neltharion tilted his head, thinking. This situation smelled like a plot. If Veranoth had chosen to side with the incarnates, Iridikron could have sent her forth with this story, hoping to lure Alexstrasza from the safety of her broodlands. In her infinite mercy, the Dragon Queen would rush across the borders, hoping to alleviate suffering and bring those responsible to justice. Thus exposed, it would be an ideal time to capture or kill the Dragon Queen. Iridikron had to know the dragonflights would not last without Alexstrasza. No creature could survive without its beating heart. However, Neltharion could not turn away from this situation. Trap or no, he needed to investigate Veranoth's allegations. "I will go with you," Neltharion said. Veranoth dipped her head. Very, very well. I shall be glad of your company." "I will go too," Alexstrasza said. "There's no need, my queen," Neltharion said to Alexstrasza. "Allow me to go in your stead. I will be your eyes." Better for Neltharion to go alone, especially if Veranoth spoke true and the Black Dragon flight was responsible for significant loss of life. If that was the case, he would want to control the perception and reputation of his flight. Alexstrasza shook her head. "If our flights are responsible for the suffering of others, I want to see the pain we have brought with my own eyes." "Come then," Veranoth said. "We should take wing before the hour grows late." The mortal village had been reduced to nothing more than ash. Neltharion and Veranoth were the first to arrive. The Dragon Queen had to let at least the Black Dragonflight take the vanguard. Neltharion circled the demolished village in the air. When Vembrian and his obsidian guard have signaled that the area was secure, the Earth Warder banked and glided towards the ground. So Veranoth had not been lying about the villages, which means Neltharion had a different problem now. The Earth Warder landed amidst the remains of a wrecked hut. Charred wood had disintegrated under his feet, and a skull rolled into the space between his toes. Disgusted, he battered the remains away, kicking up a cloud of ash. The little village might have been a charming one, at least by Terrasec standards. Tucked away beneath the protective wing of a mountain range, 15 huts and one stood on a pretty river bank. Now the village was naught but blackened bones and burned corpses. The air smelled of charcoal, and the breeze rattled in what was left of the trees. Under Neltharion's feet, the earth still cried out in pain. Embers seethed inside the soil, burning deeper into the world's crust. The Dragon Queen will The Dragon Queen will blame you and your flights for this destruction, said the whisper. They will say you are unfit to lead. Neltharion frowned, pushing the words from his mind. To his chagrin, the magic that called to him from the ground was ordered, and unmistakably from his flight too. As his flight leaders landed about him, Neltharion exchanged a wary glance with Vembrian. Clearly the old guard captain sensed it as well. Say nothing, Neltharion said under his breath. Especially to the Dragon Queen. We will deal with this issue ourselves. Search the area and bring every scrap of evidence to my attention. At once, my aspect, Vembrian said, bowing. I will inform the others. Neltharion turned. Alexstrasza landed among the ruins, her features twisted in despair. She stirred her talons in the ash, exposing a set of skeletons clinging to one another. The Dragon Queen set her foot down and stared at the bones. Neltharion cared little for the burgeoning mortal races and even less for the Terrasec. Yet the absolute wretchedness in Alexstrasza's bearing struck him to the core. The Dragon Queen closed her eyes and lowered her head. Her wings drooped. Several heartbeats passed in silence. A whisper curled in the back of his mind, beckoning to him. She is too weak to lead, the sibilant voice said, its vowels warped. Why weren't you chosen? Are you even weaker than she? She will not have the strength to do what must be done. There are many different kinds of strengths, Neltharion told the whispers in his head. But only one triumphs in war, the whispers said. Alexstrasza's voice tore Neltharion from his thoughts. Terror permeates this place, she said. These creatures died screaming, and their cries still echo off the mountains that surround this place. It is unfathomable to think what of our own kind could have done such a thing. And you say there are more places like this? Alexstrasza lifted her head and looked to Veranoth, who stood a few wingspans away from the queen. By my count, at least 10, Veranoth replied, her gaze full of accusations. So many, Alexstrasza lamented. Order magic is meant to call us to an even higher, call us ever higher, away from our baser instincts. This makes no sense. Perhaps order magic is not what you were promised, Veranoth replied. Alexstrasza gritted her teeth and said nothing. While the Dragon Queen mourned, Neltharion began investigating the village and its surrounding environs. Working with Vembrian, the Earth Warder dug in the ash, examined the burn patterns on the ground, and noted the depth of embers burrowing deeper into the soil. 6 moons passed, he mused to himself, rubbing some of the ash between his talons. The village had burned barely a clutch of moons ago. Neltharion frowned. He saw the what all around him, but he was once more missing the why. The Earth Warder walked to the sandy river bank, gazing at the turbulent white water as it rushed over the rocks. Underfoot, he sensed a strange yet familiar energy. Curious, Neltharion pressed his forefoot into the wet sand, asking it to part for him. The sand cracked and split. yawning open to reveal a thick, twisted branch. Thin fingers of lightning rose from the ground and sizzled about the damp bank. The scent of storms filled Notharian's nostrils, fresh and sharp. With a frown, Notharian reached into the earth and extracted the branch. No, not a branch. A fulgurite. A tube of vitrified sand. A fulgurite took the fury of the lightning and trapped it in glass. At 2 talons lengths, this was one of the largest specimens Notharian had seen in his life. Only a massive thunderbolt could have created such a thing. Notharian lifted a fulgurite in his forefoot, thinking, such an object may have been created by natural means. After all, it was not uncommon for powerful storms to strike along shorelines and roil among mountain ranges. But this particular artifact bristled with elemental magic. Not long ago, he had seen one of the Storm Eater's creations on the horizon, a great churning maelstrom that blotted out the sun. The residual magic in the fulgurite reminded Notharian too keenly of Razaget's wild, unpredictable power. The Storm Eater was not clever enough to devise a plot like this. No, this was Eridicron's doing. The Scone Scale must have found a way to coerce a black dragon into helping Razageth with their grim work. The Earth Warder turned his head, eyeing Viranoth. The primal dragon stood with Alexstrasza on the other side of the clearing, examining a copse of burned trees. Overhead, the black dragons wheeled in the skies, ever vigilant. Did Viranoth know of Razageth's involvement? The primal dragon was wise. If she had known about Razageth's part here, she likely would have come to the same conclusions as Notharian had, and confronted Eridicron, not Alexstrasza. Eridicron must have fed her a partial truth through a third party, knowing Viranoth would go straight to the Dragon Queen. What was Eridicron playing at? What sort of trap had he set for the aspects, via mortals and Terrasect, no less? The fledgling mortal races were insignificant creatures. They should have been far below the notice of a dragon like Eridicron. Their lives burned bright for a moment, but that was all. My aspect, Fembrian said, alighting beside Notharian. The others are ready to move on. Very well, Notharian replied, blinking his thoughts away. He offered the fulgurite to Fembrian. Send one of your guards back to the Obsidian Citadel with this at once. Fulgurite, Fembrian said, taking the glassy tube from Notharian. He sat back at his haunches, eyes widening as he turned the tube between his talons. Fembrian held it up to his snout and inhaled. Was this made by Razageth's bolts? Perhaps, Notharian replied. Take it to Umbrenian and tell them to look into the matter. Titans be good, Fembrian breathed. Varian is our swiftest flyer. I will send him forth at once. Do not be seen, Notharian said. For now, it's best the Dragon Queen does not know. She is too trusting, and we dare not risk Viranoth learning what we know. Understood, Fembrian said. With worry pressing heavily on his mind, Notharian took wing, rejoining Alexstrasza and Viranoth in the skies. Every village they visited was nothing more than a dark smudge upon the landscape. Alexstrasza stood amidst the ruins of another settlement, her 7th that day. Charcoal dust coated her limbs to the knee and blackened her belly and tail. Her heart, too, felt as ashen as the grime on her scales. Ordered dragons had burned these villages. Her dragons. Notharian had confirmed it, as had Malagos, who had been summoned to survey the arcane energies in the area. Alexstrasza called Norsdormo to their side, too, hoping that the bronze aspect might peer into the past and help them understand what had happened in this place. I'm sorry, Norsdormo had said to her, but the threads of time are delicate, and I'm still mastering this art. I dare not risk meddling with the timeways until you have exhausted all other options. Very well, my friend, Alexstrasza had replied with a sigh. We will find another way. This village was different from the others. This was a mortal settlement, not a Terrasect one, and its destruction was fresh. Embers burned low among the charcoal huts. Ash fluttered in the air like snowflakes. Half the trees surrounding the village had been reduced to blackened bones. Overhead, the day faltered. The sun sank toward the horizon, stretching long, tarried shadows across the ground. Alexstrasza's nostrils were filled with the stench of death, and her eyes watered from the debris in the air, but she could not look away. She counted every corpse, tallying up the dead. All told, their numbers were over 100. Adults, whelps. Every death left another rent in her heart. As Dragon Queen, it was her responsibility to ensure the flight's route flew straight and true. As Lifebinder, she had a charge to safeguard all life on Azeroth. She found herself failing both duties. How could any dragon, ordered or not, kill so senselessly and without need? Alexstrasza's guards found tracks outside the settlement, indicating several mortals had survived. The thought brought her little comfort. Even if some had survived, they had lost their homes. Their families, too. Alexstrasza knew some things of the mortal condition. They had been continuing to explore visages, after all, and she knew they could not survive long without shelter, food, and clean water. She tried to find solace in watching her flights work together. Neltharion stood on the perimeter of the settlement with Alagos, examining traces of magic in the burned structures. Later, the Black Dragon flight would gather the remains and draw the earth up over the corpses. The Bronzes and Blues worked together, searching for evidence amongst the ruins. Meanwhile, the Reds used their cleansing fire to heal the landscape and coax new growth from the ashes. Together, they would find the dragon or dragons responsible. Tell me, Alexstrasza asked as Varanoth landed beside her. Where do the victims go when they flee this destruction? The mortals disappear, Varanoth replied. Whether they die in the wilds or travel to neighboring settlements, I do not know. The Terrasak, on the other hand. There was a beat of silence. They go to Harrow's Deep, Alexstrasza said. Indeed, Varanoth said. Can you blame them? Their families burned to death before their very eyes. Would you not also take up arms in your own defense? Alexstrasza eyed Varanoth. No, I would first seek understanding. You cannot ask that of them, Alexstrasza. Varanoth said, her stare cold. You cannot ask that of any of us. Us? Alexstrasza asked, tossing her head as she turned to face Varanoth. Do you sympathize with the Incarnates, then? With Iridikron, who would burn the birdlands, slaughter all my kind, raise this world to see his will done? I know your heart, my friend, Varanoth said. But there are other matters I have not broached with you about your kind. The words your kind were laced with so much bitterness, they churned in Alexstrasza's stomach. Varanoth had said too much, accidentally revealing a bias that she, in all her wisdom, had not realized she possessed. Even if she apologized, the wound to their friendship would remain. Meaning what, exactly? Alexstrasza asked through her teeth. I slipped into Varanoth's tone. The primal dragons who brought this issue to my attention were driven from their territory by your flights. I thought their concerns might be a chance occurrence, but now to see your flights attacking defenseless mortals in Terrasek. My flights are not attacking the settlements, Alexstrasza said to her friend. Neltharion believes these attacks are workings of a single rogue dragon. Is that the truth? Varanoth said. Or is that simply what you want to believe? Do you know what your flights do when your back is turned? Not this, Alexstrasza replied with a firm shake of her head. The dragonflights swore sacred oaths to protect life, not to take it without cause. You must understand, Varanoth, this is not who we are. This is not what we do. Do not ask me to try to understand, Varanoth said. You are changed, Alexstrasza. Everything about you, from your scent to your very essence, is unrecognizable. You have rejected who, no, what you are. I am what I have always been. I am Alexstrasza, she said, stepping forward. Ever have I fought to defend the helpless, and if you cannot see that now, perhaps it is because your heart has frozen. You are the one who keeps company with the cruel, the merciless. Alexstrasza spread her wings wide to gesture to the ruined lands around them. It would not surprise me to learn that the incarnates had something to do with this destruction. You would point a talon at your enemy and blame them for the faults of your flights, Veritas said, eyeing Alexstrasza with distaste. And you would accuse me on hearsay, Alexstrasza said. You did not see these attacks for yourself. How do you know Eurydichron isn't manipulating you as he has done so many others? Because I can trust my kind, Veritas said in a half-roar, her words echoing off the cliffs around them. The sentiment seemed to surprise her as much as it did Alexstrasza. The ice dragon took a step back, stricken. Silence rushed in, hushed every voice in the valley. The Lifebinder loosed a deep sigh. After the horror she had seen that day, she did not want to end it with harsh words and hurt feelings. She had been trying to salvage her friendship with Veranov of late, but every time she tried to cross the chasm between them, the gap only grew wider. Veranov, she began softly, but the ice dragon turned away, shaking her head. There's nothing more to be said between us. And with that, Veranov took wing and disappeared into the growing dusk. Alexstrasza neither followed the ice dragon nor tried to call her back as she might have once done. Instead, she turned and beckoned to the other aspects. We have immediate need of ambassadors to the mortal races. Finish the work on the visages, or else a fear Nostroma's predictions will come to pass. Veranoth returned north, relieved to take comfort in the chilly peaks of her mountain eyrie. As she neared it, the chill soothed the pain of her broken heart, patching the cracks with ice. The day had shown her that she and Alexstrasza had gone too far apart for their friendship to survive. Veranoth had expected it to happen, but perhaps not so soon. She had no doubt that Alexstrasza wanted to protect this world, but to alter the natural order of things was imprudent at best and deadly at worst. Could Alexstrasza not see how this situation could spiral out of control? What if a significant force of ordered dragons turned against their aspects? What if an aspect turned their monstrous strength against their own kind, as Galakrond had? Veranoth shuddered at the thought. Galakrond, left unchecked, would have consumed them all. It's kind of a foreshadowing about all the corruptions of the dragonflies now, doesn't it? Veranoth could not return to the Broodlands, not in good conscience. Not now, perhaps not ever. Gloomy, unnatural clouds collected over the frozen fangs. As Veranoth approached her eyrie, she spotted Razagath lounging at the cave's mouth, a pair of slain stags at her side. The clouds rumbled, heralding their mistress, but the storm did not break. Your visit is not unwelcome, Storm Eater, Veranoth said as she alighted on the icy edge outside her home. Though I am not in the mood for games. No, I would imagine not, Razagath replied, getting to her feet. I came north today to see if you would like to join me for a hunt, but found you missing. Little Nalakrona told me you had gone to the Broodlands. Figured you would be hungry after a long flight. Storm Eater gestured to the two stags. Veranoth cocked her head. As much as she liked Razagath, the Storm Eater did not often think of others' needs, not out of maliciousness or self-centeredness, but merely from a lack of awareness. Razagath, like a storm itself, cared not for anything but her own fury. Perhaps it made this display of friendship all the more remarkable. Perhaps the Storm Eater would be able to learn kindness, or at the very least something akin to it. The frustration melted from the wing muscles of Veranoth's back. Your thoughtfulness is appreciated, my friend. Today has been trying. The aspects have forgotten what it means to be a dragon, Razagath said. Taking one of the stags at her jaws, she tossed it at Veranoth's feet. A little warmth still radiated from the creature. Alexstrasza and her kith have been tamed by their keepers. You should have forsaken them long ago. Perhaps, Veranoth said. Why should you still waste your time with them? Razagath asked. then tore it into her prey. Flesh ripped, bones crunched, viscera spilled out onto the ice still steaming. The scent hit Veranos' nostrils heady enough to make her stomach growl. I thought I could hold Alexstrasza to account for her actions, Veranos said, turning her head to look south. Instead, she turns the blame on the primal dragons for the wrongs of her flights. Razagath lifted her head, her snout smeared with gore. Bits of lightning snapped between her horns. Whatever do you mean? Her flights burned Terrasec and mortal settlements along the Broodlands borders, Veranos said. Yet, Alexstrasza seeks to lay the blame at Iridikron's feet. Razagath's glowing silver eyes narrowed. Overhead, thunder rumbled. What would make her think we were to blame for such atrocities? Does she have any evidence? Any reason to believe Iridikron would strike at the Terracept? They are his allies. No, Veranos said, though she thought she heard a sliver of uncertainty in Razagath's voice, and that gave her pause. Razagath said. If the aspects are already turning on their neighbors and chasing primal dragons from their territories, it will be long before they come for us. Alexstrasza does not want war with the incarnates, Veranos replied. Perhaps not, Razagath said. But can you say the same of Neltharion, of Malagos? Do you believe they will leave our kind in peace? Because I do not. You sound too much like Iridikron, my friend, Veranos said. After everything you have seen in the Broodlands, how can you disagree? Razagath said, a growl creeping in her voice. Can you say with certainty that we have nothing to fear from the aspects and their hateful flights? Perhaps the fact that you haven't joined them yet is proof enough of your doubts. Veranos blew out a breath. Perhaps it is because I can't trust Iridikron no more than I can trust Alexstrasza. No more perhaps. Eat, Razagath said, gesturing to the stag at Veranos' feet. Then tell me what the aspects know of these attacks on the villages. And since I'm having a joyful time trying to keep my throat from having tickles and spasm and all that, we will leave it there, because I think the next chapter is going to be longer than my allotted time being on. So, excuse me, hang on one second. Apologize very much for all the blanks that I have to put into this, because I'm still recovering from the cold that I caught last week, which really didn't hit me until Tuesday of last week, so technically I sort of have like 2 more days to get over this, I think. It's gonna be fun days. Anyway, so, interesting stuff. You get to see how things developed. First contacts and everything like that, and how everything is starting to spiral out of control now. But yeah, the continent should not be called Kalimdor until the Night Elves come about and they are blessed by a loon. The name comes from a loon. Kalimdor is a Titan word, but the thing is that it was one gifted by a loon to her Night Elves. Because Kalimdor, the children of the stars, the Kaldorei is children of the stars, and Kalimdor is the land of the stars. So I think they put it in there just so that everybody has a good idea of what we're talking about. Like, where are we? But Azeroth is pretty well known for having its large landmass, especially at this time. I think they're still trying to. I don't know if they're trying to make it sound like the Dragon Isles are actually attached to Kalimdor. I believe it was until the Cataclysm, but I can't be sure of that. I need some better maps for me to figure that part out. But yeah, that's going to be the end of my streaming for this weekend. I hope you all enjoyed. I know I skipped a day because I was pretty tired and sick. We jumped back into it. We had 3 days at least. And I should be much more healthy by the next time I'm on. So if you enjoyed the streams this weekend, please consider a follow and hitting that notification button so you know we're on. Our normal schedule is Thursday through Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard, 6 p.m. Pacific. Should there be another time where I'm sick or I can't make it or I'm not going to be around or if I'm late, anything like that, there's a delay in the stream or there's not a stream, please consider joining up on our Discord page. There's a link in the description. Also, exclamation point Discord, and you get a link to our private server. This is where I normally make all of my announcements of when I'm going on or if there's a problem. We also have other channels in there for chatting and stuff. Feel free to start up some conversations in there, say hi, and make some friends. We do have a Facebook page. It's not as active as the Discord is, and your best bet is to join up with Discord at this time. We also have a YouTube page, link below. There's a link to that, exclamation YouTube. Currently, it's getting buried in the ratings. It's got VODs on there, but I'm hoping to make other videos on there as soon as I can, where we're going to have lore videos, playthroughs of Warcraft and other games, the Overthinking series. I'm already starting to work with a couple of people on some interesting deep dives into a couple of things that have been either written or on the internet. So stay tuned for that. There will be announcements of when it's available on Discord. We are getting lost in the algorithm. More eyes on me when I'm live helps boost that algorithm. So if you enjoy this and have friends who would like to enjoy lore videos, playthroughs of such, not just people grinding and raiding and such like that, have somebody who's like explaining the story of the games to you, goes off on wild tangents about other things too. Like we had a wild take of how Anakin is almost parallel to Anakin, and Anakin is a parallel to Arthas in ways, and I did a thing like that. But yeah, if you liked those kind of things and those kind of tangents and watching playthroughs and having it all explained, this is the place to be, and I could really appreciate getting that boost in the views in the algorithm because I'd like to make to affiliate. I know my being sick doesn't help too much, but less I have to go out, the better. But this is coming from a massive convention with many people in there. You can't help but get sick with being there. I don't think there's been ever a year that I went to Gen Con and I did not get sick. Either during or after it. And my partner got it during the convention and I got it the day after we came home. So it is what it is. Okay, so thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good week, and we will see you on Thursday. Take care. We'll see you next time.